to Brazil to Cuba, some aspects of its belief system still survive today. The government in Benin now hopes that by boosting religious tourism, it can not only develop the economy, but also remove the stigma attached to a spirituality practiced by tens of millions of people around the world.
Sam Bradpiece there. That's all for this edition of the programme. I'm Pascal Harter. The producer was Polly Hope. And you can hear more stories, including some thoughts on whether 2024's US election is really such a break from historic precedent, as some people say, on the From Our Own Correspondent podcast. And we'll be back next weekend here on the BBC World Service.
That was the BBC programme From Our Own Correspondent. I'm Saroja Coelho. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba. Welcome to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, sitting in as your host today. In with me are May McKillop, our show director, Abby Adeyemi, our studio technician and weather specialist. Kevin Nipatebo is producing our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel, and Heather Wells is in the newsroom with the CBC Manitoba news headlines. Well, as we wait for those news, I'll give you a sense of what's coming up on the show. It's the eve of Election Day in the United States, and you're going to hear a lot about the Electoral College starting tomorrow night as results emerge from the states across America and start to paint a picture of whether Kamala Harris or Donald Trump have won the presidency. We're going to hear more about the Electoral College and why it exists ahead on Information Radio. But first, here's the news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning, Anne. I do apologize having a debate with Marcy over time change, so that held me up. But we will tell
Important news.
As a postal strike looms, Canada Post workers and their supporters gathered at the Manitoba legislature yesterday. The union was in a legal strike position as of Sunday, but they and Canada Post agreed to 72-hour notice before a strike or lockout. We're going to hear from the union coming up. And we're also going to hear a story about a woman who was killed near Portage Place Mall last week. Her family has laid flowers where her body was found. Brianna Klaus was a mother of 4 and died after being found critically injured in the first 100 block of the Promenade on Thursday afternoon. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather. That's CBC's Heather Wells. Well, more of what to expect in the first hour of the show. Sleep can be elusive for new parents, but also for those waiting up for their teenager to come home from a party. We're going to chat with a parenting author on how to manage sleeplessness, and a 1985 book that chronicles the life of a young boy going to a residential school is getting a second lease on life. We're going to find out why up first on the show. Showers today in Winnipeg, ending around noon, then cloudy, breezy this morning, becoming light this afternoon. High 7, temperature falling to +3 this afternoon. Brandon mainly cloudy, clearing early this afternoon, breezy with a high of 7. And for Thompson today, mainly cloudy, chance of flurries early this morning. Fog patches breaking up, going up to a high of +2.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
Canadian rapper, singer, producer Chaos is looking back on his smash album Joyful Rebellion with a 20th anniversary reissue box set. He joins me in studio to talk about his long journey to develop the sound and messages that helped propel that album up the charts.
Take off the crabs in the bucket.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Millions of Americans are preparing to head to the polls to choose their next president. Today is the last day of campaigning for both the Democratic and Republican candidates. Kamala Harris made her final pitch to voters in Michigan yesterday.
In one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime, and we have momentum. It is on our side. Can you feel it?
At a rally in Georgia, Donald Trump stuck to his playbook for the future of America.
With your vote on Tuesday, I will end inflation. I will stop the invasion of criminals coming into our country. And I will bring back the American dream. We're going to bring back the American dream.
Swing states are critical for both candidates. One of them is North Carolina. The state shattered early voting records this year. More than 4.4 million people cast early ballots. Many of the counties where residents cast those early ballots are ones hardest hit by Helene. The hurricane and tropical storm killed more than 100 people in the state and left thousands more devastated. The CBC's Katie Nicholson has more from North Carolina.
It's been 5 weeks since the remnants of Hurricane Helene slammed western North Carolina with floodwater and landslides.
There were bales of hay, which are about 1,100 pounds, just bouncing down the river.
Anna Ray and husband Jason Stokes have only just returned to their Burnsville area home near the Appalachian Mountains after being rescued by kayak in a multi-agency federal response. Between dealing with insurance, the damage, and the lack of potable water, you'd think voting would be the last thing on their minds. But the storm inspired them to hit the ballot box early.
If we want to have a government that works, then we've got to get this vote right.
Yeah, I just wanted to check off one more thing off my list.
There were fears voter turnout would be depressed by the storm. Special measures were brought in 13 of the hardest hit counties to make voting more accessible. Now those areas lead the state in early voting by 2%. Most of them Republican strongholds.
It was almost comical to see the Republicans suddenly caring so much about early voting.
Democratic Chair for Buncombe County, Kathy Klein, says she was amused to see Republicans embrace early voting. Donald Trump has repeatedly questioned the security of early voting. Some are nervous the special Helene voting measures may later be challenged.
And we have many attorneys ready for that.
And with North Carolina such a traditionally tight race with tiny margins, those challenges very likely to come. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Asheville, North Carolina.
It is all down to today. This is the final day of campaigning for both Trump and Harris. And the CBC's Karen Pauls joins me now from Washington. And Karen, what are the candidates doing today during this last push for votes?
Both campaigns are focusing on key swing states as they're locked in a fierce battle for every vote. Vice President Kamala Harris will spend her final day of campaigning in Pennsylvania. Oprah Winfrey will deliver remarks, and Lady Gaga will perform in Philadelphia. And Harris's Pittsburgh rally will include performances by Katy Perry and others. Former President Donald Trump will be in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. His campaign will roll into West Palm Beach tonight, and he'll cast his ballot there tomorrow morning.
And what are the final messages the candidates are trying to get across as voters head out to those polls?
Harris and Trump are offering contrasting messaging in their battle for the White House. Trump saying he can't lose as long as there's no cheating.
And this is really all you need to know. Kamala broke it, and I'll fix it, and we'll do it very quickly.
Harris says her team has momentum because it's tapping into the ambitions, aspirations, and dreams of the American people. She's reached out to Michigan's Arab American community.
As president, I will do everything in my power to end the war in Gaza, to bring home the hostages, end the suffering in Gaza, ensure Israel is secure, and ensure the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, freedom, security, and self-determination.
It will be a busy day for both candidates with a lot at stake.
Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Karen Pauls in Washington. Israel's foreign ministry says it has formally put the United Nations on notice. It sent a letter to the UN officially notifying it of its intention to ban UNRWA. That is the UN's agency for Palestinian refugees. For more, let's go to the CBC's Sasha Petrusik in Jerusalem. Sasha, what is the significance of this move?
This is another step on the way for Israel to effectively ban UNRWA from operating in the Palestinian territories, the occupied West Bank, the annexed section of Jerusalem, and most critically, the occupied part of Gaza right now, which relies on UNRWA for food aid in particular, medical aid. It is the main organization that not only delivers this aid, but coordinates aid with other organizations. Last week, Israel passed a law that effectively set the clock ticking 90 days. Within that period of time, UNRWA would not be able to operate within Israel and effectively not within these other territories as well. Israel has long accused UNRWA of being too close to various groups that Israel considers terrorist organizations, notably Hamas in Gaza, and it has accused UNRWA of not doing anything to sever those ties, to prevent its employees from working with Hamas, and from preventing its facilities from being used by Hamas to launch various attacks. UNRWA has denied all of that, and it has said it has severed ties with anybody that it considers part of Hamas. That's 9 people out of 13,000 that work for it. So through these 90 days, at the end, it could well be even more difficult for aid organizations to deliver aid throughout Gaza, and many of these parts of the territory that are already in dire need will be in even worse shape.
Thank you, Sasha.
My pleasure.
The CBC Sasha Petrusek reporting from Jerusalem. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is calling on the country's premiers to get on board with his plan to lower house prices. He sent a letter to them yesterday, and here to go through it, Janice McGregor from our Parliamentary Bureau. Janice, what does this letter say?
Marcia, it's pretty extraordinary for the leader of the opposition to preemptively call on premiers to match a move that he hasn't even been elected to make yet. But in this letter released to reporters this morning, Pierre Poilievre doing just that, portraying this as a way provincial jurisdictions can help him make home ownership more than just a dream for young Canadians again, because taxes and government fees add what Poilievre calls unnecessary costs to home buyers. The letter says that if provinces match this, they could save their residents tens of thousands and generate more income tax revenue from the additional construction it would stimulate. It also says Conservatives understand that all provinces are different. Housing issues more acute in some places than others. And of course, some, like Alberta, don't have any provincial sales tax to cut. But when the federal government cut its GST on construction of new affordable rental units, Ontario, for example, did follow suit. It cut its provincial tax as well. Others did not, at a time when provincial coffers are under a lot of pressure, need more revenue for things like escalating healthcare costs.
So how could the federal government afford this move?
Well, in his initial announcement a week ago, Poilievre said his government would be able to afford this tax cut because he'd cut billions from the Housing Accelerator and infrastructure funds that the Trudeau government's been rolling out. He dismissed these as funds that build bureaucracy, not homes. But Liberals point to examples of mayors and municipalities across Canada that needed, used this money to spark new construction projects.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Quincy Jones has died. He was one of the first Black executives to thrive in Hollywood and the music producer who brought us this. Jones produced some of Michael Jackson's biggest hits, including this historic Thriller album. He was a singer-songwriter of prize-winning film and television scores. Jones oversaw the recording of We Are the World for famine relief in Africa. He helped organize President Bill Clinton's first inaugural celebration, and his publicist says he died Sunday night at his home in Bel Air, surrounded by his family. Quincy Jones was 91. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. It's 7 degrees with showers at the Forks. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, filling in as your host today. Here's what's coming up on the show. Millions of American voters will head to the polls tomorrow for Election Day, but the winner of the presidential election won't be decided by the popular vote. It's up to a system called the Electoral College. We'll find out more about how it works and its controversies. Sleep when the baby sleeps, and it'll get better when they're older. That's just some of the advice exhausted parents hear when their kids are young. We'll hear from a parenting writer who's heard it all and who'll bring his own take on the perennial question of parental sleep. But first, a 1985 book that chronicles the life of a young boy going to a residential school is getting a second lease on life. We'll find out why, all that and more coming up on Information Radio. 11 minutes after 6 o'clock, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the family of a woman killed near Portage Place Mall last week is remembering her as a loving mother to her 4 children. She died after being found critically injured in the first 100 block of the Promenade. Cassandra Flett, the paternal aunt of one of her children, says she had gone to college and at one time worked in healthcare but struggled in recent years. We're going to hear more about that. As well, a Winnipeg holiday charity is cracking down. A Winnipeg holiday charity cracking down on families double dipping on Christmas hampers. One community advocate says denying families holiday hampers goes against the spirit of the season. That story is also coming up at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. Abby Adeyemi joins us now with a look at the weather. Good morning, Abby.
Good morning, Em. How was your weekend?
Oh, very relaxing. I actually enjoyed that rainy day yesterday. It had been a while since we had a day like that.
Yeah, and it's still, a lot of people are still enjoying that.
Yeah.
I hope you remember to wake up this morning, because when it rains, people get comfy and like, I'm just going to do an extra 15 minutes.
Yes, it's easy to fall back asleep with that.
So watch out for it. Don't let that rain trick you into sleeping an hour extra, actually, instead of taking 15. This showers we're seeing will stay with us till like the midday period for most of the regions. Then it will be easing across the province, leading to mostly cloudy conditions, and we'll see temperatures cooling down. Yeah, we're starting off a bit damp with, the lingering showers in the city and the southern regions this morning. That, as mentioned earlier, should be ending around noon. Currently, Winnipeg, we are at 7 degrees. Though temperatures will gradually be falling to about 3 this afternoon. Just expect cloudy skies as the showers move out, with light breeze picking up from the northwest by mid-morning before they calm down later. Now, despite the dip in temperature, we're still slightly warmer than seasonal, which is the norm for this time of the year, is at 2 degrees. Tonight, we're going to see the skies will definitely be staying mostly cloudy still, with temperatures holding steady near 3 degrees, keeping a cool but mild feel through the night. If we look at other regions, the north will see cooler temperatures, with Churchill already experiencing light snow at this time, and highs around 2 degrees for that region. Thompson currently at 1, Churchill at 1, and down south we're seeing rain ending near noon. Then that will be followed by cloudy skies, and we'll see most of the regions seeing temperatures drop to around 3 this afternoon. But right now, Winnipeg, we are at 7, and we're seeing this light shower still staying with us till like close to midday.
I'm not actually complaining about that.
No complaints.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
That's CBC's Abby Adeyemi. He's also our studio technician. And joining us now is our show director and traffic reporter, May McKillop. Good morning, May.
Good morning, Emily. Nice to work with you today.
Yes, as always.
I'm seeing one spot show up on TrafficNet here. Northbound Balmoral Street between Sargent Ave and Cumberland is closed for gas work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anything else out there that our listeners are seeing? I would love to hear about the commute today. Give us a call, 204-788-3093.
It's 6:15, 7 degrees with showers at the Forks. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg, around the world on the CBC Listen app and streaming on our YouTube channel. I'm Emily Brass, in for Marcy Marcusa today. Well, imagine what it's like to go to a residential school as a young boy in the early 20th century. It's an experience residential school survivor and United Church minister Enos Montour shared nearly 4 decades ago. He self-published that experience in a book called Brown Tom's School Days, but it was limited to photocopies for family and friends. That's why nearly 40 years later, that book's getting a second life And for a good reason. University of Winnipeg professor and historian Mary Jane McCallum is the editor of the novel's second edition. Good morning, Mary.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, pretty good. Monday morning,
Yep, I hear you.
So, for many of our listeners who don't know the story, can you tell us what Brown Tom's School Days is about?
Sure. Brown Tom's School Days is a collection of stories about Mount Elgin Residential School in the years around 1909 to 1914 or 15, or around the First World War. And it is about a boy named Tom who experiences, this world, I guess he would say, of the residential school, coming from Six Nations of the Grand River Territory in Ontario, and he's a Delaware person. And so he comes to Mount Elgin and writes, and later Enos Montour writes about this story as a kind of semi-fictional memoir.
Okay. And your great-grandfather attended the same school, I hear, so that gives you a real personal connection.
Exactly.
Yeah, how did that affect your work while you were working on the second edition?
Well, it's funny. I guess I'm inspired both by family and community history, but also, as an academic historian trained in, universities' history departments, really. And so in this work on Mount Elgin Residential School, it gives me this opportunity to combine those two aspects of interest and inspiration and, I guess, academic passion. So it is a really fascinating way to look at both community history at a time before living memory, but also, there are so many things about that I see in these stories that continue till today, including the ways, people think about life and their neighbors and building relations and those kinds of lessons.
And you see that firsthand, I guess, because your family was affected too.
That's right, yeah. Enos Montour attended residential school at the same time as my great-grandfather, Alonzo Logan, and his brother Arnold, and probably his sister as well.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
And so Enos, mostly passed this book on to his friends and family through photocopies. How did you find out about it and get your hands on it?
Well, I was at the National Archives, which is in Ottawa, and it's a library and an archives. And I had read a reference to the book in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission final report. And so I ordered it while I was there because it's a non-lending library. And I was just really struck by the specialness of this text. As a historian, I pour through archives, and one of my interests is Mount Elgin Residential School, and there is a gap in the records between around 1900 to about 1930. So it's very hard to find out about what life was like at the school then. Plus, those archives are all from the perspectives of white, often British and Canadian workers who worked for Indian Affairs or the churches. And so to have the perspective of a First Nations boy in this time period is just so special.
Yeah. And so is that why you wanted to give the story a second lease on life? Like, why did you want it told now?
Absolutely. Like, that is one of the key things. It's about kind of thinking about the past, especially through the voice of a Delaware person, author, lover of writing, but also to kind of see the school through the eyes of a boy who was living in the territory at the time. So he makes observations about the school, but also the world around him. And many of those ring very true to today still. The environment is very similar today. So, the book, his stories talk about real people, real events, but they're also very literary and very telling of his education and his love of reading and writing. So it's just a really special kind of book.
Yeah, tell us a little more about the author Enos Montour. Like, what was he like after his time at Mount Elgin Residential School? What kind of things did he do in life?
He had a very fascinating life. So he left the school at around 1914 or 15, and he ended up wanting to continue his education. So Mount Elgin, like all residential schools, went to grade 8. So he found a place in a public high school in Hagersville, which is near Six Nations. And then he actually found a way to continue to go to McGill University for a Bachelor of Arts in the 1920s, and then a Bachelor of Divinity right afterwards at this Wesleyan Theological College that was connected to McGill. And then once he was ordained as a United Church minister, he moved to Saskatchewan. And he was a minister in sort of small white settler towns in Saskatchewan for many years, coming back to Six Nations for about 6 years and then returning to Saskatchewan. And that's where he had his family. And I imagine, a lot of practice writing as a minister. And he worked in newspapers. He wrote a few books of his own. And he had this just really fascinating life. He retires back to Ontario, and then he passes away in the mid-'80s.
Wow. And of course, leaving behind a lot of his personal story in this Brown Tom School Day book. Is that important to connect with now? Like, what can we learn that it should give us insight to what's going on in Canada now?
Oh, I think there's a lot to learn. So he was writing throughout his life, but he really wanted this book to be published. And so he tried many different Canadian presses, mostly based in Toronto and Ontario, but he was unable to have his book accepted to be published at the time. And I think this was a time when people were really not talking about residential schools. And if they were very hesitant or held back about what actually happened in them. And so you can tell, even in his writing, that he's very careful about how he talks about the employees that worked at the school. He does approach the topics of starvation and hunger, about the strictness of the schools, and about the death of a student from tuberculosis. But he is, he's very restrained. And I think you can read a lot about how things have changed in our discussion about residential schools today from having a look at the way they're talked about by him in the 1980s.
What an interesting historical document. And thanks for bringing it back to life for us and for joining us this morning, Mary.
Thanks. Is there one more thing I can say here, Emily?
Sure, just before we go, yeah.
Okay. Well, the launch that we're going to be having at McNally on Thursday at 7 is very special because we're kind of trying to talk about the author-editor relationship. And this was very key to Enos Montour's method of writing. And so we're really honoring him by kind of talking about what it is to build a relationship between an author and an editor. And we're going to have Jill McConkey, who's the senior editor at the University of Manitoba Press there. And it's going to be a little different.
Wow. Yeah, that's a very interesting aspect to learn about. So many things that'll be learned. Thank you so much, Mary.
Okay. Thank you.
Mary Jane McCallum is editor of Brown Tom School Days 2nd edition. And that book has a launch, as she mentioned, at McNally Robinson Thursday at 7.
Breaking news happens anywhere, anytime.
Police have warned the protesters repeatedly, get back.
CBC News brings the story to you as it happens.
Hundreds of wildfires are burning.
Be the first to know what's going on and what that means for you and for Canadians.
This situation has changed very quickly.
Helping make sense of the world when it matters most. Stay in the know. CBC News.
Good morning, 6:25. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Well, tomorrow is Election Day in the U.S., and most American voters will cast ballots for either Democratic or Republican candidates. And the vast majority of those contests, congressional, state, and local races, will be decided by popular vote. But there's one notable exception. The President of the United States is decided by a process called the Electoral College. And if you've wondered what that is or how it works, Brian Hurl joins us now to explain. He's an assistant professor in the Department of Political Science at the University of Toronto. Hi, Ryan.
Good morning.
So what is the Electoral College and why does it exist?
Well, there's a long answer and a short answer. I'll try my best to give the short answer. I think the key thing to keep in mind is back when they were creating the United States Constitution, you were bringing together 13 different colonies. The small colonies did not want to be overwhelmed by the larger colonies, the ones in terms of population. So you have various defenses for smaller states, smaller population states. The most obvious defense in the American Constitution for the smaller population states is the Senate, where every state, no matter how small, gets to have 2 senators. And it's actually the one part of the Constitution that can't be changed through a constitutional amendment. So a protection for the states built into the Constitution in terms of representation. A similar protection is built into the selection for the president. Every single state in the United States has a vote in the so-called Electoral College equal to their delegation in the House of Representatives, which is based upon population, and in the Senate. So what this means in practice is that even if mostly the presidency is determined by a kind of representation by population, there is a bias in favor of smaller states, because even if you only have one member of the House of Representatives, like Wyoming, you will always have 2 senators. So there'll be a slight bias in favor of the smaller states.
Interesting, yeah.
In terms of why it's an electoral college, that's a longer story, but the basic idea is that the framers thought that the people would select a group of experts, hopefully political experts, who would then choose the president. So the way they envisioned it was that you'd be voting for someone who would have the experience and knowledge to choose the best president. And keep in mind, this is a time where you couldn't just go online and look at someone's campaign literature. You weren't subjected to constant different sources of information. It might have seemed reasonable at that time. It didn't work in practice, right? In practice, as soon as political parties emerged, electors, instead of having an independent vote for the president, they were pledged to the particular political parties, right? So perhaps that helps explain why it was once called an electoral college. What do you do at college? You sit around talking, right? The idea was that the members of the electoral college in the states would kind of debate amongst themselves and then make a free choice for the president. That was never really put into practice. So the electoral college itself, the electors play mostly just a formal role. They're people who are pledged to support a particular candidate, but they typically do not play any independent role in selection for the president.
Okay. And there are 538 electors in that electoral college, and a presidential candidate needs 270 of those votes to win. How are electoral votes distributed among the states?
The key thing to remember is that for most of the states, almost all of them, and certainly the largest states, the electors will go to whoever wins the vote in the state. Right? It's a winner-take-all system. So in other words, Vice President Harris, it doesn't matter if she wins California by 40% of the vote or if she wins California by 100 votes. All of those 55 votes are going to go to Harris. So you have to think about it just for a second and see this creates an interesting set of incentives for the candidates. Trump is not going to have much of an incentive to campaign in states like California, like Illinois, like New York, where there's no hope of winning. You're only going to really focus your efforts on the states where your campaign is likely to shift the outcome. So this means then, in theory, it is possible, not all that likely in terms of American history as a whole, but certainly possible that someone could craft a campaign strategy where you just ignore voters in California, you ignore your voters in New York, you focus simply on mobilizing all your resources to win the states that will give you a victory in the Electoral College.
Okay, and unfortunately, we're running out of time, Ryan, but before you go, I do want to know, with all this in mind, what should we be watching for tomorrow night as the votes are counted and the results start to be reported?
I would say if you're pressed for time tomorrow, look at the results in Pennsylvania. I think if Trump wins Pennsylvania, his hopes are very good. I think if he loses Pennsylvania, I don't think he will have any chance of winning the presidency. And in some ways, Pennsylvania is kind of like a microcosm of the United States as a whole, at least more so than many of the states that are firmly committed to either Democratic Party or the Republican Party.
Okay, all eyes on Pennsylvania. Thank you so much for joining us, Ryan.
Oh, no problem at all. Thank you.
Ryan Hurl is an assistant professor from the University of Toronto. The news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is 7 degrees, and these showers we have right now will end around noon, and this nice mild temperature, that's going to end too. We're going to see the temperature fall to about 3 this afternoon. The family of a woman killed near Portage Place Mall last week has placed flowers where she was found. Brianna Klaus was a mother of 4. She died after being found critically injured in the first 100 block of the Promenade shortly before 3 Thursday afternoon. Cassandra Flett is the parental aunt of Klaus's oldest child, and she has visited the site twice now with Brianna's family.
It's an eerie feeling to be there. We were just coming there as forensics was leaving and with items, and it's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking for her parents, for her sister, for her children, for all of us.
Flett says Klaus had gone to college and at one time worked in healthcare, but struggled in recent years and often spent time at Portage Place where she was known. 32-year-old Ryan Kennedy has been arrested and is now charged with second-degree murder. A Winnipeg holiday charity is cracking down on families double-dipping on Christmas hampers. The Christmas Cheer Board says it will check if people requesting food and gifts have asked for hampers elsewhere. Executive Director Shauna Bell says she just wants everyone to have a fair chance at getting a hamper.
It is such a stressful time of this year for so many folks. And, I cannot hold it against anybody who is looking in a number of different areas to just be able to have some relief from that stress. But it's just one of those things that we need to help as many people as we can.
The Christmas Cheer Board had to stop taking applications last year because of high demand. Bell says up to 700 applications that year were duplicates. A community advocate says denying families holiday hampers because they asked for one elsewhere goes against the spirit of the season. Phone lines for Christmas hamper requests open tomorrow. More than 100 postal workers rallied outside the Manitoba legislature yesterday calling for a better deal. Talks continue between their union and Canada Post. The Canadian Union of Postal Workers could have been in a legal strike position as of yesterday, but has yet to issue strike notice. Canada Post presented its latest contract offer last week, including annual wage increases of 11.5% over 4 years. Sean Tugby is president of the union's Winnipeg chapter.
The current offer for wages was less than the rate of inflation. The offer on pensions was to reduce the pensions for new members and to reduce what we have for current members as well. It's also a reduction in benefits, and so there's no gains at all. It's all concessions.
Canada Post says negotiations come at a critical time as it deals with financial and operational challenges amid competition from other parcel delivery services. Well, today is the final day of campaigning in the U.S. presidential race. Last night, Republican candidate Donald Trump held a rally in Macon, Georgia.
With your vote on Tuesday, I will end inflation. I will stop the invasion of criminals coming into our country. And I will bring back the American dream. We're going to bring back the American dream. We're just 2 days away from what will be the most important political event in the history of our country. I believe that.
Georgia is one of 7 swing states that could decide who wins the White House. Democratic Party candidate Kamala Harris spoke to supporters in East Lansing, Michigan last night.
2 days to go. In one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime, and we have momentum. It is on our side. Can you feel it?
Harris also had a message for the 200,000 Arab Americans in Michigan, vowing to do everything in her power to end the war in Gaza. You can hear more on this story and other national and international news on World Report at 7. Manitoba Housing is accusing a security guard of being inattentive and distracted as trespassers set fire to a Dauphin retirement home. A new lawsuit claims trespassers played piano, peed on the floor, and started 2 fires, all while the guard was in the building. Manitoba Housing alleges the guard did not patrol at all. It is suing him and now bankrupt Neptune Security Services, saying they were negligent. The fire happened 2 years ago. A 21-year-old man pleaded guilty to arson in the case. Well, 7 players, 7 goals.
Nikolai Ehlers will take the shot and score!
Nikolai Ehlers into an empty net in the third period last night as the Jets strike the Lightning 7-4. It was history for Ehlers, who surpassed Frans Nielsen as the highest-scoring Danish-born player in the NHL.
There's Danish guys that I've watched growing up, and Frans was obviously one of them. He was an outstanding player in this league. Lucky enough, I got to play with him at the World Championships.
Well, the Jets are back in action tomorrow against the Utah Hockey Club. You can find more news and more on last night's game. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Did you stay up late watching it, Heather?
It was an afternoon game, and you bet I watched it.
Oh, of course you did then.
So
Awesome.
great.
Good. I can tell by the excitement in your voice. It's nice to hear. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
That's CBC's Heather Wells joining us from the newsroom. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass in as your host this week. And with a look at the forecast, here's Abby Adeyemi. Hi, Abby.
I am. We're still looking at this a damp start to the week. We're seeing this rain spill over from the weekend. Light rain in most of the southern regions. Right now, 7 in Winnipeg. We're still seeing the light rain showers outside. We should expect this to ease off as we get close to the noon period, leading to mostly cloudy afternoon. Though this morning will be breezy with the winds coming later. We're going to see a high of 7, which we are at this time. From this point, we're just going to be dropping to about 3 degrees later this afternoon. Tonight, the skies will stay clear, and then we drop to a low of 4 degrees, so it's going to feel a bit chillier than that. The wind chill is going to make it feel like 8 degrees. But the promise for tomorrow, plenty of sunshine in the forecast and a gentle breeze. Brandon sitting at 3 degrees and cloudy at this time today. We should see mostly cloudy skies for that region. There's a slight chance of showers this afternoon. It will be breezy, and then we'll see a high of 7 for that region. Thompson sitting at 1 at this time, mostly cloudy conditions you're seeing, though we should expect a slight chance of a light snow later as you get into the morning. Temperatures will only warm up to 2 degrees for Thompson today. In Churchill, it is a 0, and we're seeing light snow at this time. You should expect this to stay with you for most of the day, with temperatures dropping to around -7, and with the wind chill factored in, it's going to be feeling close to -15. And for tonight, the snow will taper off when you get close to after the midnight period, and the temperature is going to remain steady near -6. Dauphin is sitting at 4 at this time and cloudy. We're expecting some clear skies later, and then the highs will warm up to about 7. There were some breezy conditions factored in. Gimli sitting at 6. Light showers you're seeing also. Forecast for the Interlake region today calls for showers ending near the noon period, turning cloudy for the rest of the day. You should see some breezy conditions from the northwest this morning. Then that will, calm down later. We're going to see highs of 7 for that region. Steinbach also sitting at 7 at this time. We're seeing light showers there. This shower should be wrapping up as you get close to your lunch break, leaving a cloudy afternoon and breezy northwest winds. And then temperatures similar to Winnipeg will be dropping to around 3 degrees this afternoon. Morris is at 7, and also showers there. We're seeing the forecast calls for the showers tapering off close to the noon period, leading to cloudy skies, breezy morning, calm light winds by the afternoon period, and the highs also 7 where you are at this time. From this point, you're just going to be dropping to around -4 for Morris. So you're just looking at today bringing more like showers ending close to the noon period across most of the region, leading to cloudy afternoon and cooling temperatures later in the day. We're going to see, temperatures currently at 7 where we are now, and then it's just going to be dropping from there for most of the regions.
So basically one of those days it's impossible to wear the right jacket.
Yeah.
You got to bring the umbrella, but then you got to pack it in your bag.
I stepped out this morning and it felt like a day in August. I was like, okay, did I pick the jacket? And then I found out, it's going to cool off as I head home later in the day.
Yeah, good thing you brought the jacket. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
That's Abby Adeyemi. He's also our studio technician. With him behind the glass is Kevin Nipatebo, who streams on our YouTube channel for us. And right now in the room with me is May McKillop, our show director, who's taking a look at the traffic.
Hi, Emily.
Hi.
I'm going to let our listeners know about two spots. We haven't had any phone calls on the commuter line so far, but that's pretty normal for this early in the show. One spot that I'm looking at is northbound Balmoral Street between Sargent Ave and Cumberland. The curb lane is closed for gas work. That's northbound Balmoral. As well, we've been talking about this area during the morning show because people end up calling usually at some point in the show. So I'll let our listeners know that westbound Abenoji-Meekina from La Jamodiere to Lakewood Boulevard, the westbound curb lane is closed for construction. So expect delays. I think that that construction is there for a couple more days still. Anything else people are seeing out there, I'd love to hear about it. Give us a call, 204-788-3093.
Thank you so much, May. That's May McKillop, our show director and our traffic reporter. It's 6:41. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM. It's also heard worldwide on the CBC Listen app and on our website. And you can check us out on YouTube. That's on the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. Well, it's time now for some business news. Phil DeMont joins us with the Business Report. Good morning, Phil.
Morning, Emily.
So the U.S. election tomorrow, it's the big economic news as well this week. What are the economic consequences to the Canadian economy of that vote?
Yeah, I kind of hate stories like this in a way because everybody's covered them all every way, and you're kind of like, okay, what can I say that's kind of new? So the common wisdom is that a Trump presidency would be worse for Canada, and there is some truth to that. First of all, idiosyncratic method of governing last time around could lead to unexpected clashes in the economic files in a second term in government if he wins. He would bring up stuff that people didn't know was an issue, and then he brought it up against the American economy so they can kind of push the agenda. But its trade policy really has economists scared. He's threatening to impose a 10% across-the-board tariff on Canadian goods heading south of the border, and American markets gobble up 70% of what we sell to foreigners. Scotiabank estimates that new tariff would shave close to 4% off of our GDP, gross domestic product, and add nearly 2 percentage points to our inflation rate, so if 2 becomes 4%. Kamala Harris's platform also contains tariffs, but they're mostly on goods from China, not Canada. Trump, perhaps ironically, could hurt global stock markets with his policies. His proposed large tax cuts and various tax holidays would increase the American debt and deficit by a factor maybe of 3. That, in turn, could drive up interest rates for borrowers and hurt stock prices in the short term. This is not a central bank issue. It's a bond market issue. If he has too much borrowing out there, it'll tend to drive up interest rates in the bond market. Harris's platform also would boost U.S. public debt, just not by as much. It's tax competitiveness, though, where his policies might cause the most trouble. He wants to slash the federal tax rate on companies to 15%. That would put pressure on Ottawa to reduce corporate taxes up here or else risk losing firms that could relocate to the American economy. But the governing Liberals are widely seen to have very little fiscal room to cut taxes or do anything, really, because our deficits for a while now have been large and they've been persistent. So there's just not a lot of fiscal room. That's the real area because a lot of economists would applaud lower taxes for corporations, and there wouldn't be much we could do to defend against that.
Wow, okay. Meanwhile, we're also seeing more labor trouble on both sides of the border. Why is that happening?
Yeah, you kind of see this in the headlines. Up here, the newscast was talking about Canada Post workers. Well, they're in a position to issue a 72-hour strike notice if contract talks with the corporation stall, and they appear to be heading down that path. In BC, the employer group representing ports there threatening to close those facilities this week. The employer and the union have been negotiating a new contract for 2 years. Hasn't really working. U.S. Boeing holding a vote this week to possibly end that 7-week strike that's crippled that corporation. Cornell University says there were already 77% more strikes in the U.S. last year than the 3 years earlier. Canada, the story's kind of the same. Two factors here: general economic slowdown in Canada and some specific sectors in the U.S. like restaurants, straining companies financially. They don't have enough cash. But a number of contracts have been expired in the past year or so. So if you're the union, this is your one chance to get a new deal that covers all the previous increases in the cost of living. You know, you don't really have a choice because once you sign the deal, you're not doing anything for a couple of more years. Overall, the strike number dropping this year compared to last year, but the desire to get more money for the union members, it hasn't.
Okay, shifting gears now. What is Travel Tuesday and why is it getting more popular?
Yeah, I'd never heard of this, but Travel Tuesday, it turns out, is the first Tuesday after American Thanksgiving, so December 3rd. That's when people in Canada and the U.S. start scrolling for trip discounts. Usually we associate after Thanksgiving with Cyber Monday, where you're buying your flat-screen TV. McKinsey, though, the business consultancy, says Google searches for Travel Tuesday last year were up 500% from a couple of years ago. Cyber Monday still dwarfs Travel Tuesday, but the figure's growing. You got a big booking spike in the number in November last year of hotels, cruises, and flights, and companies taking notice. Disney, for example, gussies up its theme parks at Halloween and Christmas. It would kind of, you think so, but it turns out October and December are two of the most popular times for their theme parks. Experts say two reasons. North Americans aged 25 to 44 are most likely to catch the travel bug, and in Canada, that's 11 million people. And older adults are more likely these days than in past decades to gift a travel experience to another family member, like the grandkids, take them to Disney, that kind of thing. So you see those trends converging in Travel Tuesday. I never heard of it. I'm going to start looking up discounts.
Well, if anyone wants to gift some travel to me, I wouldn't complain. So what's happening in the market so far, Phil?
Right now, they're in a waiting mode for the U.S. election. The UK up 0.5%. Nikkei in Japan's closed for a national holiday, but the Shanghai market in China up 1.25%. Oil's up $2.12, $71.61 a barrel, and the Canadian dollar up to close to a fifth of a cent, trading at 71.93 cents U.S.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Emily.
That was Phil DeMont with the CBC Business News. Oh, I bet that's the sound a lot of you are hearing right now with this beautiful rainy weather. This morning, to mark the change back to daylight standard time, we're talking sleep, specifically the lack of sleep among parents. To quote one Canadian public health campaign, becoming a parent involves significant sleep deprivation. And this lack of sleep doesn't necessarily end when your baby becomes a toddler, because even parents of teens can have sleep issues if their child is up at all hours, ignoring the curfew. Sleep is one of the big issues our next guest hears about as a parenting author, and something he has firsthand experience with as well. S. Bear Bergman is author of Special Topics in Being a Parent, a Queer and Tender Guide to Things I've Learned About Parenting, Mostly the Hard Way. He spoke with CBC's Marcy Marcusa last week.
Good morning.
So what has your experience been like as a parent with sleep, or sleeplessness, maybe I should say?
Well, I will tell you that when our first child was born, my grandmother gave me several pieces of good advice. And one of them was, either you get a good eater or you get a good sleeper. Almost never both, and occasionally neither. God help you. Anyway, we have 3 great eaters. And the sleep story at our house has required some problem solving over the years.
Tell me a little bit about that and why it's important that parents overall get enough sleep, and think about how to solve that.
In terms of the sleep piece, we know, just in terms of science, right? While we sleep, our bodies are doing and our brains are doing a ton of important work. That's when everything gets, repaired and managed. And if we don't sleep enough, we're susceptible to, colds and flus. And also, if we don't sleep enough for long enough, then it's, we're at a higher risk for chronic health conditions like diabetes and heart failure, not to mention all the research about how past a certain point of exhaustion, driving while you're tired is as bad as driving while you're intoxicated, right? Nobody wants that. But also, I'll speak for myself, but I am so much more patient and flexible and good-natured as a parent when I've had enough sleep. I think that we've miscategorized getting enough sleep as self-care. I don't think it is self-care. I think it is actually important family care. It's really critical for the wellness of the whole family system that the adults get enough sleep. And sometimes that means, extra, you got to prep for it, or maybe you make trade-offs, but it really is, it's so important.
Now, one of the things, just to stay personally with you and your parenting experience, it was an emergency pastry protocol that helped at least one of the parents get a sleep, and then you trade off. How did it work?
It's, a very grand title because we named it, I think, at 4:45 in the morning on a Sunday. But it's the most straightforward thing. One parent, whichever one is not going to get the extra sleep, you just sweep all of the children out of the house and into the car or the stroller. Still in their pajamas is fine. Bedhead is fine. Put a coat on everyone. Take all their bedhead to the furthest reasonable location to buy something like a donut or a muffin, right? Like you're looking for the Tim Hortons that's 25 minutes away, or something like that. And then don't give them their muffins yet. You take the children and the baked goods to the playground, and then you release them and you give them their treats, and they can get crumbs everywhere and run around and scream, and there's no line for the swings. If you have little babies, you can just sort of walk around with them while the toddlers or preschoolers play, and then after a while you put everybody back in the car and you start the walk or the drive home. But now with practice, you can make getting a muffin take 2 hours. That's a whole REM cycle.
Yeah, while the other person's sleeping, I was going to say.
Yes.
Why do you think that more parents don't get adequate rest? Like, is there an attitudinal thing that somehow you have to do it all and rest is lack of sleep is part of that?
I think that's part of it. I think there is a lot of cultural pressure to do an increasing number of things for our children in order to, be the best possible parent. I definitely see a lot of social media, here's an adorable bento box lunch where everything has a cute face. That's 25 minutes of your day you could have been sleeping. Or these videos that say, every other week you should dust your baseboards. And I don't want to horrify your listeners, but I need to tell you it's been more than 2 weeks since I dusted my baseboards, and I have slept. I have slept instead. But I also think that schedules are just a lot more intense these days, and there are fewer households that have even one adult who doesn't have to fling themselves out the door in the morning to go work outside the house. And the combination of those things, I think it just eats away at our sleep time, and I think we need to take it back to make sure we're getting enough sleep as parents.
What are the social pressures in terms of what's socially acceptable that maybe we could sort of reframe so that parents get equal amounts of rest?
Do you mean equal amounts to each other? Like, certainly I think there's a gendered thing at play. I think it's very common that, in families where there's a mom and a dad, it is much more likely that it's the mom who is getting up in the morning and the dad who is taking the opportunity to sleep in. But also, I think it's not just a question of sleep. Sometimes what we need isn't the kind of rest that you get from sleeping. It's more that we need rejuvenation, right? We need to refresh our spirit, if you will. And I think that, it's a lot more acceptable for the dads to go off and play golf or go hunting or go out on their skidoo or their boat or whatever than it is for the moms to go and do that. And I think time with friends, time in nature, time, enjoying the arts, whether that's a concert or a movie or a play, are important ways that, whatever you like. Like, I'm not saying you have to go to the symphony if you don't like the symphony, but going out and doing something that you enjoy with friends and no children is something that I think all parents need and frankly deserve.
What about looking at the kids? Is it possible to teach the kids to let people sleep in occasionally?
It really is. And I will tell you how we did it. It's a two-part situation. Part one is we would make a snack plate the night before, some cut up fruit, slices of cheese, a little pile of crackers. And then I would always add an item that I thought of as the bait, which would be something that they would not typically be allowed to have in the morning, like a cookie or a Pop-Tart, right? Just something exciting enough to help them remember to go get the snack plate. And then, starting from like 3 years old, they'd go downstairs, they'd get out their snack plate, they'd turn on Octonauts, and we would get a little more sleep. But also, part two was that we really talked to them about the idea that adult sleep was important and that this was something they could do for us to let us sleep. And so then not only did they get, the independence and the cookie, but they also got the sense of accomplishment in being able to help their grown-ups to get some more sleep. And they will literally begin to time themselves to see how long they can let the grown-ups sleep. It will become a game, and then you get up and it's daylight. It's very exciting.
Lots of
you get to praise them. Yeah.
Lots of really good ideas in here. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
S. Bear Bergman is author of Special Topics in Being a Parent, a queer and tender guide to things I've learned about parenting, mostly the hard way. Heather Wells is joining us now with a look at the headlines.
Good morning. Well, the family of a woman killed near Portage Place Mall last week is remembering her as a loving mother to her 4 children. Brianna Klaus died after being found critically injured in the first 100 block of the promenade shortly after 3 Thursday afternoon. The aunt of her oldest child says Klaus had gone to college and at one time worked in healthcare but struggled in recent years. We're going to hear more about her. And as a postal strike looms, Canada Post workers and their supporters gathered at the Manitoba legislature yesterday. We'll hear about that rally coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells joining us from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. Well, still to come on the show, we'll meet a fitness consultant who helps people get healthy, and it starts with the power to believe in yourself. That's coming up later. And first, a traveling book club has started up here in Winnipeg. And guess what? They're headed to Scotland. And you might still be able to join them. We're going to hear more about that coming up as well. And catastrophic floods have devastated Spain. The death toll continues to rise. We're going to speak to a former Winnipegger who's living in Valencia to hear how he and his family are surviving the country's worst flooding in 4 decades. Right now, it's 7 degrees with showers at the Fork. Showers ending around noon today. Breezy, but becoming light this afternoon with a high of 7. But then that temperature is going to fall to +3 this afternoon. A few clouds tonight with a low of -4. Then mainly sunny with a light breeze tomorrow and a high of 6. In Brandon, mainly cloudy today, clearing this afternoon. Breezy with a high of 7. Clear tonight, low -7. Then mainly sunny tomorrow with a high of 8. In Thompson today, it's mainly cloudy. Slight chance of flurries early this morning, and then the fog patches are going to break up with a high of +2. Tonight, mainly cloudy, slight chance of flurries overnight with a low of -4. Mainly cloudy tomorrow, again with a slight chance of flurries and a light breeze and a high of -2. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 189.3 FM in Winnipeg. As well, you can hear us on the CBC Listen app or watch us on our YouTube channel. World Report's up next.
Today on The Current.
Will you accept the results of the election, regardless of who wins? Yes or no, please.
Counting votes after an election should be the easy part. But across the U.S., there are concerns about the election certification process, as Donald Trump's team has laid the groundwork to claim voter fraud if he loses. The countdown to start counting on The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. We are just one day away from the U.S. presidential election. Republican candidate Donald Trump is pushing his narrative that the last election was stolen from him. Democratic candidate Kamala Harris is trying to assure Americans the voting systems are secure. But that is adding to concerns across the country about the possibility of more political violence. The CBC's Katie Simpson has more from Washington.
We should have one-day voting and paper ballots.
Donald Trump is now claiming that if it takes a matter of days for a winner to be determined, Democrats are going to try and steal a win away from him, priming his voters to reject the results should he lose, as he did in 2020.
I would ask, in particular, people who have not yet voted, to not fall for his tactic.
Kamala Harris is trying to reassure Americans their vote will count and that systems are secure as concern grows about more political violence.
Considering, what happened last time after the election results, it's definitely a little scary being here in D.C.
Bryson Baker is a senior at Howard University, Kamala Harris's alma mater, where her election night headquarters will be held.
I think after the 2 assassination attempts on Trump, I think that the Secret Service and the federal law enforcement has really beefed up its security.
Dr. Elsie Scott is the founder of a leadership and public policy organization based at Howard. She says because of that additional security, she's not as concerned about what may come in the days ahead, though some D.C. business owners have boarded up their storefronts, fearing volatility. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
More than 78 million Americans have cast their early ballots ahead of Tuesday's vote. But as we get down to the wire in the U.S. presidential campaign, voters in key swing states are more important than ever. Pennsylvania is one of them. The CBC's Richard Madden is in Pittsburgh, speaking with voters getting ready to cast their ballots.
We just don't talk about politics because it just does, to me, doesn't make any sense.
Outside this busy cafe in Pittsburgh, old friends Silvio and Vincent are playing cards and debating the election. Vincent is voting Democrat this time.
Kamala, because she's the best for that. These other guys and a lunatic.
Silvio is all in for Trump.
I'm a working man. I used to be a working man, so I can afford $5 a gallon. To me, Trump was beautiful.
Their political divisions reflects the deep divide in this crucial swing state. Pennsylvania's cities may lean Democrat, but in the rural heartland, it's Trump country. Stephen Fry believes Trump's bogus claims of a stolen election in 2020 and that it's happening again in 2024.
It already is known to be rigged. There's so much corruption here.
Trump is already laying the groundwork to challenge the results of this election, claiming voter fraud and cheating. While state officials say they're investigating but have found no evidence, Philadelphia's mayor, Sherelle Parker, tells us she's not taking Trump's bait.
Everyone else is focused on nonsense and conspiracy theories coming from I don't know where. In Philadelphia, as the mayor, I have one thing in mind, and that's top. Turn out Philly.
Both presidential candidates will be barnstorming the state later today in a clear sign the road to the White House runs straight through Pennsylvania. Richard Madden, CBC News, Philadelphia.
On election night, tune into America Votes on CBC Radio. It's hosted by Your World Tonight's Susan Bonner and Pia Chattopadhyay of the Sunday Magazine. Expect lively conversation with special guests and CBC reporters in the field, offering analysis from a Canadian perspective. You can listen to America Votes on CBC Radio and Sirius XM, or stream it live on CBC Listen and or the CBC News app. It all begins at 8 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night. The UK-based Medical Aid for Palestinians says all 3 remaining hospitals in northern Gaza are under attack. It says one is under direct artillery fire, one has been shelled, and the third has been hit by drone strikes. The group calls these attacks part of a sustained assault on Gaza's health system and a war crime. The Israel Defense Forces asked patients and escorts to evacuate hospitals in northern Gaza over the weekend. It says 29 people were moved to other hospitals in the Gaza Strip. Some health critics and legal experts are calling for Ontario to overhaul its physician oversight process. They say current policies do not do enough to safeguard patients. Their calls come after a recent CBC investigation. It revealed sexual abuse allegations against a former pediatrician in Toronto. Faith Greco brings us the update.
Why did he manage to continue his practice?
Suzanne Barrow says she was sexually assaulted by a Toronto doctor in 1980. She was 12 years old. 3 other women made similar abuse allegations against the same doctor. He faced disciplinary hearings, but he continued to practice for 13 years after the first allegation came out. Legal experts say the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, which regulates medicine in the province, prioritizes protecting physicians' reputations over patient safety. Paul Hart is a medical malpractice lawyer in Toronto.
Fundamentally, the root problem is it's a self-regulating profession.
He says doctors shouldn't be overseeing doctors. For its part, the medical regulator says it's made changes and now requires members to disclose conflicts of interest and to undergo training. France Gelina is the Ontario NDP health critic. She says the province needs to review the system that subsidizes legal defenses for doctors accused of wrongdoing.
The physicians that have maliciously hurt patients continue to go scot-free.
In a statement to CBC, the government referred back to the authority of the college, but says Ontario has zero tolerance for the abuse of patients by physicians or other regulated health professionals. Faith Greco, CBC News, Ottawa.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is asking the country's premiers to support his new housing plan. He sent a letter to the premiers yesterday. In it, he says if he's elected prime minister, he will scrap the federal sales tax on all homes that cost less than $1 million. And he asks that the leaders do the same for any provincial or territorial sales tax. Poilievre says the move will make housing more affordable and it will mean more homes will be built each year. There is a flood of reaction to a CBC News investigation into telecom contracts. Hundreds of customers from Rogers, Bell, and Telus have contacted our Go Public team. They say they are frustrated with contracts that lock them into a fixed term but allow prices to rise. As Erica Johnson tells us, there are calls for the regulator to investigate.
It was a bit of a shock.
Melanie Norman of Scarborough, Ontario, is one of hundreds of people who've recently contacted Go Public, frustrated over price increases to their monthly internet, TV, and home phone bills while they're in a contract. She reached out after an earlier Go Public story about a Rogers customer whose bill went up during her contract. In Norman's case, she agreed to a 3-year deal with Bell, but it went up $5 for TV on her first bill, a price increase the Bell agent never told her could happen.
Wasn't clear at all. Never mentioned it.
Across the country, customers from Bell, Rogers, and Telus say they're fed up with contracts that lock them in for 2, even 3 years, while the telecom providers can jack up prices.
Canadians are getting ripped off.
On Parliament Hill, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is calling on the government to take action, and there are calls for the regulator to investigate. Contract law expert Marina Pavlovich says the CRTC needs to hold hearings.
It is high time for that to happen.
After Go Public contacted Bell, a spokesperson said the fact prices are subject to change is clearly displayed on its website and in contracts, but gave Melanie Norman a credit to cover her unexpected costs. Consumer advocates say price increases during a contract shouldn't be allowed in the first place. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
A titan of the music industry, Quincy Jones, has died. And today he's being remembered as a one-of-a-kind talent. Jones produced Michael Jackson's album Thriller, but he also collaborated with Ray Charles, Frank Sinatra, and hundreds of other artists. He won 28 Grammys, 2 honorary Academy Awards, an Emmy, and his memoir made him a best-selling author. He spoke to the National's Ian Hanmansing back in 2018.
I've never in my life ever done music for money or fame. Never, and never will. Because God walks out of the room then. It's not sacred anymore.
Jones died last night in Los Angeles, surrounded by his loved ones. In a statement, his family says they're celebrating a great life lived, and they know there will never be another like him. Quincy Jones was 91. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. It's 7 degrees with showers right now at the Forks. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, sitting in as your host today. And here's what's coming up on the show. It's one of the worst natural disasters in European history, and its death toll continues to rise. We'll speak to a former Winnipegger living in Spain for an update on the flash flooding ravaging that country. We'll also have the first of a special series to help you feel good about yourself, both inside and out. It's called In Good Health, and that's coming up later in this half hour of the show, or this hour rather. But first, have you ever wanted to step inside your favorite books and see those locations up close? We're going to talk with someone who's offering Winnipeggers that special chance. All that and more coming up on Information Radio. 11 minutes after 7 o'clock, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the family of a woman killed near Portage Place Mall last week has placed flowers where her body was found. Brianna Klaus was the mother of 4. She died after being found critically injured in the first 100 block of the Promenade on Thursday. Cassandra Flett says Klaus had gone to college and at one time worked in healthcare, but struggled in recent years. Over the weekend, police arrested and charged 32-year-old Ryan Kennedy with second-degree murder. A Winnipeg holiday charity is cracking down on families double dipping on Christmas hampers. The Christmas Cheer Board says it's going to check if people requesting food and gifts have asked for hampers elsewhere. A community advocate says denying families holiday hampers goes against the spirit of the season. We'll hear more on those stories coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. 12 minutes after 7 o'clock now, and Abby Adeyemi has a look at the weather. Hi, Abby.
I am still light showers in the southern areas this morning, though they will be lighting up as we get close to the noon period. We can expect mostly cloudy skies and cooler temperatures as the rain moves out. Right now, Winnipeg, 7 degrees. We still have that light rain outside. That should stop around the noon period, leaving us with mostly cloudy skies. A light breeze will come from the northwest this morning, but it will calm down later, and we'll see temperatures stay at this 7 degrees for a while before dropping to around 3 this afternoon. Even though it's getting cooler, it's still a bit warmer than the average of 2 degrees for this time of the year. And then tonight will remain mostly cloudy and temperatures will stay around 3 degrees, keeping a cool but mild feeling throughout the night. And in other regions, we're looking at the north, feeling some cooler temperatures. Churchill currently seeing light snow with highs just going to be getting close to 2 degrees for the northern region. Thompson at 1, Churchill 0. Down south, we're seeing this showers stopping by midday, leading to mostly cloudy conditions. Brandon and Dauphin hovering around 4 degrees. Dauphin seeing some cloudy conditions and Brandon seeing that light rain. Both regions will get to a high of 7 with breezy conditions. While for Gimli, Steinbach and Morris, we're seeing temperatures around 7 with that showers that will be ending around noon. Though from here, temperatures will be dropping to around 3 this afternoon. So in summary, I'll just tell you, light showers this morning, ending by midday. Cloudy conditions will follow, breeze in the south, and temperatures will be dropping all the way to 3.
I can't remember the last time we had a nice rainy period like this.
I know, it's November.
Right? I know, especially in November. Usually it's the white stuff by now.
Yeah, it's November, and I'm like, okay, I'm taking it.
Yeah, no kidding. Thank you so much, Abby.
Thank you.
That's Abby Adiemi. He's also our technician out there in the studio. And next to him is Kevin Nibateba, who is producing our CBC YouTube channel this morning. And in studio with me right now is show director May McKillop, who's taking a look at the traffic.
Hey, Emily. So no calls on the commuter line so far. I would love to hear how the roads are going out there. I will let our listeners know about one spot. This is northbound Balmoral between Sargent and Cumberland Avenue. The curb lane is closed for gas work. Anything else that our listeners are seeing out there, I would love to hear about the commute. Give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Good morning, Manitoba. 7:15. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Well, have you ever wished you could visit the locations in your favorite books? You know, step inside the pages? That's the experience McNally Robinson wants to give readers on its first ever traveling book club. It's just a few months from now in April when members will escape to Scotland and they'll visit locations found in popular novels. Chris Hall joins us in studio now. He's a co-founder of McNally Robinson and the head of the Traveling Book Club. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Emily.
So tell us about the McNally Robinson Traveling Book Club. What is it?
Well, it's a harebrained scheme I've had for a long time. A long-time traveler, love to travel. And now I've worked at the bookstore for 28 years. So most of that time I've thought of this and never really could figure out how we'd get the hotels booked and so on. So we've partnered with Megan Reimer from Cruise Vacations of Winnipeg, and we are, the idea is to have a book club. We meet in the community classroom in the store, although we will have it be hybrid too, so you can stream it and you don't have to be there physically. And we will meet in January, February, March and read as many Scotland books, Scottish authors, Scottish settings as we can. And then we will go for 14 days in the end of April into May to see them and soak it in and talk about the books we've read.
Sounds exciting. So you mentioned, being in the bookstore and always having that idea for a long time. What is it about books that made you think, well, let's go visit the places in the books?
Well, I've realized as part of this that I've always taken myself on literary tours wherever I go. So the idea, Megan came to us pre-COVID, and then we had to shelve the idea, of course. And then about a year and a half ago, I went to Ireland and realized in the middle of it, wait a minute, I'm on a literary tour of Ireland that I've taken myself on. So when I got back, we got back in touch with Megan and we got it put together. So yes, she has put us together with Globus, which is a tour company. So this is a full tour. The classroom holds about 30 people, so 30 plus a few virtual attendees. The bus holds 40-ish, and it's perfect. Perfect combination.
And so why Scotland? Are there certain books or authors about, in Scotland that are drawing you?
Well, I'm calling it the first journey. So this isn't the first and last. This is something we can do again and again, and it could be other destinations. So I had a short list, and Scotland was certainly on it. I thought, it's English, it's books that are not in translation and things like that. So I thought maybe it would be a little bit easier to start with instead of something too exotic. But Scotland is certainly something would have been on my short list regardless.
Yeah. So where are you going on the tour, and which authors are connected to the different destinations?
Well, we land in Edinburgh and spend a few days there, and of course hang out with maybe not with, but Ian Rankin and Rebus and some of the mysteries that are set there, and Muriel Spark and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is set in Edinburgh. So there's a number of things. And then we head up north, and we get up through Inverness and then right up to the top of the northernmost tip of the mainland. And then we do a day trip over to the Orkney Islands and then back. There's a book called Outrun right now. It's been made into a movie that's been recently getting a lot of buzz. So that's going to be our Orkney book. And then we loop back around the west side of Scotland. We tip our caps to the Hebrides. We will not get out there, but maybe we can see them in the distance. And then all the way back down through Fort William and the Isle of Skye and so on, right back to Glasgow. And of course, in Glasgow, there's some great books too, some darker books. It's a bit of more of a working class town than Edinburgh. And then we loop back through the south because that's where Walter Scott country is and Robbie Burns' house and things like that. But there's something called the Tartan Noir, which is mysteries set in Scotland. So there's a lot of mysteries to read.
Oh my gosh.
So the idea
fun.
is to just have a reading list. You can
Yeah.
read whatever you like on it. And as a group, we'll have read a lot of those books. And if you haven't read Robbie Burns when we're at that house, I'll bet you somebody in the group has and can tell us what their response is.
Right.
Yeah.
The beauty of having a group there.
I think so.
And so apart from organizing, what other things make up your role on this trip?
Well, my role will be leading the 3 sessions of the book club and dealing with all the technology and so on. But kind of leading the way, doing as much reading as I possibly can. I've done a lot of reading in my life, so I've got a lot of background for these trips. So I just want to share the love of reading, though. This isn't about taking tests or needing to have anything specific to say. This is about having fun, reading books, recommending them to each other, discovering readers that are like-minded and all of that. And then I just find it a deeper experience when I'm in the country and I have read a little bit of the history of it maybe, or just some of the settings. It's kind of neat to walk down the streets of Edinburgh when you've been reading about a character who's been doing the same thing.
Yeah, I always try to find a book that's based in whatever area I'm going to go travel to and kind of get a sense the same way. So for other listeners who are out there, maybe they're fascinated by Scottish mystery and Tartan Noir and some of the poetry of Robbie Burns, and they want to attend, what do they need to know? Like, how much does it cost? What's the deadline?
Yeah, well, it's all on our websites. The best thing you can do is McNallyRobinson.com. There's a tile right there. You click on it. There's a whole page there. It'll take you to everything. The one thing to know about the cost is that it includes everything. So it is, if you go as a couple, it is $66.95 per person. If you go as a single, it's $86.95 per person. You do have to get there and back on top of it. But you are looked after for 14 days. Globus is going to provide a tour guide, so I'm not going to tell you where we are. I'm going to be listening to the tour guide as well. All the hotels, almost all of the food. Yeah, a lot of the details are there, but yeah, phone Megan Reimer at Cruise Vacations if you have questions, because she's the details person on the tour itself.
And, you touched on all those different amazing locations. Which one are you especially looking forward to, Chris?
One of my favorite scotches of all time is Oban, and we're going to stay overnight in Oban. So there might have to be a whiskey tasting in Oban for me. So that's going to be, there's going to be so many highlights, but that's the one that comes to mind.
Oh my gosh, yeah. What kind of trip to Scotland is complete without trying out the scotch?
That's right.
Well, it sounds like so much fun. Thanks so much for joining us, Chris, and telling us more.
Well, thanks for inviting me in.
Yes, that was Chris Hall from McNally Robinson. And if you think you might want to join the book club in Scotland, there's still time. You can get more info by visiting mcnallyrobinson.com/events.
I know that love is hard to find. You wanna be the lake, you wanna be the one to shine, but feelings we feel are hard to define. I know that love is hard to keep into our delicate minds. The doubt begins to creep, rudely disrupting our movie scene. I believe in love. I believe in love. I
Juno-winning songwriter Rose Cousins with I Believe in Love, and It's Very Hard. Next spring, she's going to be playing concerts in a number of Canadian cities, and it's all in support of her album Conditions of Love Volume 1, which comes out next March. 7:25 right now. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, around the world on the CBC Listen app, and streaming live on the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. Time now for a look at sports news. Scott Regehr joins us from the CBC Sports Desk. Good morning, Scott.
Hey there, Emily.
So it was a milestone night for one Jet in particular as the team continued its excellent start to the season. Tell us about that one player.
Yeah, well, that's Nick Ehlers, Emily, who had a goal and an assist in last night's 7-4 win over Tampa Bay. That goal, an empty netter that helped salt away the victory, was his 474th point in his NHL career, and thus puts Ehlers a point ahead of Frans Nielsen as the most prolific Dane in league history, a player from Denmark. Ehlers was asked what it's like to be the new king of Denmark.
Oh, I would not call myself that. You said that. Obviously, I'm very proud of this. You know, there's Danish guys that I've watched growing up, and Frans was obviously one of them. He was an outstanding player in this league. Lucky enough, I got to play with him at the World Championships in his last year, so it's a very proud moment, very happy.
Yeah, Ehlers also said while he was aware heading into the game he was close to Nielsen's record, it took him a second to realize he'd broken it on that goal. Wasn't all great news, though, for the Jets as Kyle Connor was forced to leave the game early on after being checked from behind by Nikita Kucherov. Head coach Scott Arniel doesn't sound overly concerned, though, Emily, as he pointed out that Connor was good enough to provide high fives for everyone after the win last night in the locker room. So that is good news. Winnipeg back in action tomorrow with that gaudy 11-1 record. The Jets will be hosting Utah.
That's a nice record right now. Mm-hmm. So meanwhile, it was a busy weekend of football in both the CFL and in university sports.
Right. Disappointment for the U of M as they were upset Saturday, Emily, by the visiting Regina Rams. The Bisons, who were the top-seeded program in the country going in, lost by a field goal, meaning Regina is headed to the Hardy Cup in their stead. Meantime, Winnipeg will host another Regina team in the CFL's Western Final. Trevor Harris and the Rough Riders beat BC to advance. Here's Harris.
We have the guys that I have no problem shoving all my chips in the middle of the table with, and next week, I think it's the matchup everybody in the that follows the West really wants to see is Winnipeg Sask, and they've been the big dogs for the last 5 years, and I think it's only right that we go to Princess Auto Stadium and play there. They've earned it over the last number of years, and so let's tee it up and let's go play ball.
November 9th, Western Final. That is going to be a dandy, and it's going to be a sellout, something that the Riders game yesterday was not, I might point out, something we haven't seen in Saskatchewan in years.
That's curious. So over to the basketball court now. What are your takeaways from Vince Carter getting his jersey retired over the weekend?
Well, that his love, Emily, for his time with the Raptors and in the city of Toronto was very real. You could see that on Carter's face Saturday night, which was mostly filled with tears as his number 15 was raised to the rafters. It is the first number to be so honored by the organization, and many believe DeMar DeRozan will be among the next. DeRozan leads the Raptors in all-time scoring among many other statistical categories. The team's global ambassador, Drake, was asked his thoughts about DeRozan possibly going up.
If you ever put a DeRozan banner up, I'll go up there and pull it down myself. That's the answer to your question.
Ooh, sour grapes. Drake and DeRozan were good pals when DeMar played in Toronto. The problem is, after DeRozan left the Raptors, he cameoed in a music video for rapper Kendrick Lamar, and the lyrics were not flattering.
Hey, Drake, I hear you like I'm young. You better not ever go to Cell Block 1.
So that explains Drake's ire. On Saturday night, DeRozan was at the game, too. He was playing for the visiting Sacramento Kings, and he told, when he was told Drake would tear down any banner the Raptors raised in his honor, he said, well, it's a long climb up. Good luck to him on that. So, the evening started about Vince Carter. Didn't end that way.
No kidding. Unsportsmanlike conduct, I'd say,
Indeed.
Scott.
Indeed.
Thank you so much.
You betcha.
That was Scott Regehr with the sports news. The news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. Still some light rain out there. We're at 7 degrees. The rain will end around noon, and our temperature is going to start to slide around the same time, falling to 3 this afternoon. The woman who was killed near Portage Place last week is being remembered as a loving mother to her 4 children. Brianna Klaus died after being found critically injured downtown in the first 100 block of the Promenade on Thursday. Cassandra Flett is the paternal aunt of Klaus's oldest child. She says Klaus was a college graduate who once worked in healthcare, but she suffered abuse in an earlier relationship, which set her on a different path.
She was loved. Even if we loved her from a distance, she was loved, and she was not just, someone to be thrown away. She was a person. She was a mom. She was a woman that was strong, and she deserves the justice, and her children deserve answers.
Klaus's family has placed flowers at the spot where she was found. 32-year-old Ryan Kennedy was arrested over the weekend. He is now charged with second-degree murder. A community advocate says denying families holiday hampers because they asked for one elsewhere is ridiculous. The Christmas cheerboard is cracking down on people it says are double dippers. It had to stop taking applications last year because of high demand for Christmas hampers. And it says a lot of requests last year were duplicates. Mary Burton at Zungozi O'Day says anyone who wants a hamper needs that extra help.
They only have so many donations they have to stretch it. I understand that. But to say that just because the person's going to another organization to get a hamper, that they can't get one from Cheerboard? Really? That's not the spirit of Christmas.
The Cheerboard opens phone lines for requests tomorrow. The charity expects to see a record number of applications, well above last year's 20,500. As a postal strike looms, Canada Post workers and their supporters gathered at the Manitoba legislature yesterday. The union was in a legal strike position as of Sunday, but they and Canada Post agreed to a 72-hour notice before a strike or a lockout. Jeff Didham has worked as an inside postal worker in Winnipeg for the past 15 years.
This is not where anybody wants to be. And again, we're the working class, we're the labor. And some of these guys, like I said, I'm an inside worker. Some of these guys walk equivalent to a marathon a day.
The union says Canada Post's offer of annual wage increases amounting to 11.5% over 4 years is far from what they're demanding. Canada Post says the negotiations come at a critical time as it deals with financial and operational challenges amid competition from other parcel delivery services. Millions of Americans are preparing to head to the polls to choose their next president. Today is the last day of campaigning for both the Democratic and Republican candidates. Kamala Harris made her final pitch to voters in Michigan yesterday.
In one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime, and we have momentum. It is on our side. Can you feel it?
At a rally in Georgia, Donald Trump stuck to his playbook for the future of America.
With your vote on Tuesday, I will end inflation. I will stop the invasion of criminals coming into our country. And I will bring back the American dream. We're going to bring back the American dream.
Swing states are critical for both candidates. You can hear the latest on this final day of campaigning, as well as other national and international news, coming up on World Report at 8. Manitoba Housing is accusing a security guard of being inattentive and distracted as trespassers set fire to a Dauphin retirement home. The new lawsuit claims trespassers played piano, peed on the floor, and started 2 fires, all while the guard was in the building. Manitoba Housing alleges the guard did not patrol at all. It's suing him and the now bankrupt Neptune Security Services, saying they were negligent. The fire happened 2 years ago. A 21-year-old man pleaded guilty to arson in the case. Well, notch up another win for the Winnipeg Jets.
Dylan Sandberg shoots.
Dylan Sandberg in the third period as the Jets win at home 7-4 yesterday against the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Jets fell behind by 2 goals in the first period and challenged a goal Winnipeg thought was goalie interference, but they lost that challenge. Nikolai Ehlers says his team stayed calm,
We thought that was goaltender interference, and suddenly you're down 1 and you're going on the PK, and that's what happens. But there was no panic in our group, and that shows that we have learned a lot over the past couple of years.
And Ehlers with a history-making goal last night, surpassing Frans Nielsen as the highest-scoring Danish-born player in the NHL. The Jets are back in action tomorrow against the Utah Hockey Club. You can find more on that game and more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
What a great honor for Ehlers last night.
Yeah, but he says, don't call me the king.
Yeah, the king of Denmark. Isn't that Hamlet?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not the greatest person to be following in the footsteps of.
No.
Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Newsroom. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. And joining us now with a look at the traffic is the weather on this soggy morning is Abby Adeyemi. Good morning, Abby.
Good morning, Em. Maybe I'll just start with something slightly close to traffic. Just watch out. There are going to be slippery roads out there. So if it rains, it will be slippery for sure. So allow yourself some extra braking time. I'll tell you that.
And we're not used to it anymore. It hasn't rained in so long.
Yep, so get used to it. Slippery. We're still having lingering rain in the southern part of the province, and this is expected to stop around noon period. Right now, Winnipeg, 7 degrees. Light rain we're seeing. These showers will taper off around noon, leaving us with mostly cloudy skies this afternoon. Now, you should be seeing some breezy conditions this morning. That would calm down later with temperatures dropping to around 3 degrees. Our high for today is supposed to be 7. We've been stuck at 7 since about around 5 a.m. I think from that point, we're just going to drop to 3. Heading west to Brandon, 3 degrees and misty at this time. We're looking for mostly cloudy skies today with a chance of sunshine somewhere in between this afternoon. You'll be reaching a high of 7, and then temperatures tonight will dip to -7. With a wind chill factored in, it's going to be feeling like -12. So for folks in Brandon, expect some chilly night. Moving on to Thompson, it is 1, mostly cloudy conditions you're seeing at this time. You should see a slight chance of flurries and maybe even some light snow this morning with temperatures reaching 2 degrees. And then for tonight, you'll be dipping to -4. Though for tomorrow, this cloudy conditions and light snow will continue. For Churchill, that light snow's ended for now. You're seeing some foggy conditions, more like misty out there at 1 degree. Expect cloudy skies. The light snow is going to return this afternoon. Temperatures will hold steady near -7, and then tonight you're just going to be around -6. Dauphin at -4 and cloudy. You should see some clear skies later with high of 7, and then tonight you dip to -4. Gimli at 6, light showers you're seeing at this time. Forecast for the Interlake region says the showers will be ending around noon, followed by cloudy conditions. Some breezy morning and some breezy conditions you feel this morning, high around 7, and then you will be dropping to around 3 degrees this afternoon. Similar condition in Steinbach, 7 showers you're seeing. This should be wrapping up close to the noon period, leading to cloudy conditions. And then for tonight, temperatures will be dropping to around -4. Morris at 7, showers you're seeing at this time. Your high is forecasted for 7, so that's where you are at this time. From here on, you're just going to be dipping to around 3 degrees. So we're just looking at today, seeing showers across the southern part of the province that will ease in by midday, leading to cloudy afternoons, cooler temperatures. Right now, 7 in Winnipeg, and we're dropping to 3 this afternoon. It will feel cooler later on, even though it's a bit chilly. The temperature is still above the usual seasonal of 2 degrees for this time of the year. But good news tomorrow, the sunshine is going to make its appearance in most of the southern regions, and we'll see highs around 6 degrees.
Oh, that's going to be nice. But I'm enjoying this weather while it's here, too.
I'm enjoying it. It's off and on, so I'll take it.
Yes, thank you so much, Abby.
Thank you.
That's Abby Adeyemi. He's also our studio technician. And with him behind the glass is Kevin Nipatebo, who produces our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. And joining me now in the studio is May McKillop, who has a look at the traffic.
Hey, Emily. So no calls on the commuter line so far, but I'll let our listeners know about a road closure. This is on northbound Balmoral Street between Sargent Ave and Cumberland Ave. The curb lane is closed due to gas work. Anything else out there, we'd love to hear about it. As Abby mentioned, with the rain happening, it often leads to wetter roads. something to look out for today. But if there's anything else out there that you want to let your fellow listeners know about, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Yeah, we know those orange cones are out there, and that's leading to some backups. Give us a call and let us know. Again, 204-788-3093. Well, still to come in this half hour of the show, catastrophic floods have devastated Spain, and the death toll keeps rising. We're going to speak to a former Winnipegger who's living in Valencia to hear how he and his family are surviving the country's worst flooding in 4 decades. And he sent us some pictures, and boy, it does look really bad out there. But first, we have a special series to help you feel good about yourself, both inside and out. It's called In Good Health with Chinwe Asaguera. Chinwe is a registered dietitian, a fitness motivator, and a health and wellness consultant. She spent decades studying both the science and the mental wellness needs to getting fit, and I spoke with her last week.
Hi.
So first tell us a bit about yourself and your own fitness journey.
Absolutely. So my fitness journey really began when I entered university. I had played sports in high school, and that was fun and kept me consistent, with group activities. But in university, I just felt lost. I was very overwhelmed with my studies, working, trying to find my way to the gym, and I just couldn't be consistent, which was really frustrating because I wanted to keep that up for myself. And at the same time, I discovered fitness magazines. So people in those magazines were training and lifting weights and doing bodybuilding competitions, and it just was really fascinating to me. And I thought to myself, well, maybe this is what I want to do as a way to be consistent. And I signed up for a fitness competition, and that's what helped me get into the gym and learn how to lift weights, and became kind of the foundation of my fitness journey.
Yeah, finding that motivation, I guess, helps. Yeah. And you give a lot of grace to people who are struggling emotionally with their efforts to become healthier. Tell me about that. Like, what kind of emotional barriers do people face?
Yes. So the main thing is people struggle to find motivation, and that can create, feelings of frustration, disappointment. I find a lot of times people too are focused on their past self of maybe what they were able to do 10, 15, 20 years ago, and they feel like they've let themselves down, and they kind of stay stuck in that space. And so what they may be able to do now is kind of lost or not good enough, or they're really wanting to get back to what they used to be rather than kind of figuring out a new path forward for their current life.
Yeah, people can be hardest on themselves sometimes. Are people too hard on themselves?
Yes. Yes. A lot of people can be really hard on themselves, and seeking perfection almost and wanting it to be perfect. When we're talking about health and exercise, almost counting themselves out if they can't do maybe what they see other people doing. If it can't be to that level, then there's no in between. So it's a really kind of sometimes an all or nothing mentality that can really keep people stuck.
Yeah. And so that leads us to the idea of self-efficacy. Explain that for us.
Yeah. Self-efficacy is really, it's someone's belief in their ability to achieve a goal. So when you say, I want to do this, do you really believe that you're able to do it? And that's the difference between, motivation. Motivation is kind of, you get a spark of motivation. If you think of like a New Year's resolution, or if there's like a fitness challenge, that's like, okay, I'm doing this because you're motivated by something external. Whereas self-efficacy is, do you really believe that you can achieve a goal? And people who have high self-efficacy, they are persistent when things come up, because things will always come up. Life happens. But someone with high self-efficacy will work around that. Whereas if someone who has low self-efficacy, they might get really thrown off by that and give up.
Can you give us an example of how that might affect someone?
Sure. So maybe if your work schedule changes, or if your kid's schedule changes, season change is a big one. So if you have, kiddos who are in school and then it's summer break, or you're at the lake or traveling, or if you get sick, so we're in cold and flu season, you're off for a couple of weeks because you're just not well, that can really shake some people, and they feel like, oh, great, I'm starting all over. Whereas someone with higher self-efficacy, they don't internalize that. They don't think, oh, I did something wrong. They recognize what has happened and kind of pick back up and are able to carry forward.
Yeah. And how did that help you in your own fitness regime?
For sure. So after doing my first fitness competition, I realized that, okay, I've done it once. And I kind of just thought, well, what did I do before that I can apply again? And stepping on stage for a fitness competition is like the big end goal, but there's so many things in between. So it's the individual workouts, the preparing of your food, and just, the consistency with that, sleep. And so you kind of break it down to those small tasks. I'm like, well, I did those things. I can do them again, and kind of just reapply those same strategies that worked before. And also recognizing it. So recognizing all the little things that led up to competition day, because those are like little check marks, little gold stars that remind yourself and remind your brain like, hey, I did that. And so if you try to do something new, you draw on that past success to allow yourself to realize you can do a new goal moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. So some listeners might be out there hearing this conversation and thinking, I want to make some changes, but they have no idea where to begin. What's the first thing you'd say?
The first thing I would say is to forgive yourself and practice some self-kindness, because you don't want to move forward with a punishment mentality or feeling down on yourself. So a lot of self-forgiveness and self-kindness, and then start to think also of what you have been successful with in your life, like broad, not just health, not just exercise, not just if you've been in the gym or not, like every aspect of your life with community, family, friends, work, because I'm sure there's lots. So think of where you have been successful in your life and literally make a list, write it down and reflect on that so that your brain and yourself can realize, yes, I have been able to achieve goals in the past, and then start small. So pick something that is really simple and easy for you to achieve, like drinking a glass of water in the morning before your coffee, walking for 10 minutes on your lunch break, doing some gentle stretching at night before going to bed, once a week. And then build to 2 days a week and then 3. So something really small and simple that you're able to achieve, and then just carry on from there.
And is there anything else you would advise people maybe about how to sustain that? Like you were talking about the beginnings, how do you keep it going?
Yeah, keeping it going. So really knowing what you like and your personal values are. So how you want to live your life and what things are like for you and your family is important, because then you can pick things that are in alignment with that. So if you're a really social person, then maybe getting a gym membership and going to the gym on your own isn't the best fit. But maybe joining a group fitness class where you get to meet people and listen to music and have fun would be a better option. So just really knowing what is going on for you, your life, and picking ways of movement and nutrition and wellness that are in alignment with that can help you be more consistent and help you sustain it for the long run too.
Okay, I'm sure a lot of people are appreciating this advice. Thank you so much, Chinwe.
You're welcome.
Chinwe Asaguera is a registered dietitian and fitness consultant. For more, you can go to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba, or you can tune in tonight to the CBC television news at 6. It is
your neighborhood, your community, your country, your world, your news that matters. News that belongs to you. Your World Tonight. Every night, 7 days a week on CBC Radio 1. On demand on the CBC Listen app and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Time now is 7:48. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1 from Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass. Well, it's being called one of the worst floods in Spain's history. Over 200 people are dead after torrential rain swept the eastern part of the country, and officials expect that number to rise. Flash floods have devastated the eastern region of Valencia. The government has sent over 7,000 troops in to help. Javier Duroc is a former Winnipegger living with his family in Valencia. He's joining us now live over Zoom. Good morning.
Good morning.
So,
afternoon here.
Afternoon there. How are you and your family doing right now?
Well, we're the lucky ones because we live on a higher floor from the ground level. Really, our home is safe and virtually untouched. That's not the same for my downstairs neighbors and, of course, all the towns all around us. So.
Yeah, I've seen some of the pictures from the streets. It looks awful with tons of cars upended, mud and debris everywhere. I mean, what have you been seeing?
Well, of course, yeah, everything at street level for all these towns. Just to give you an idea of the area that we're talking about, would be, say, about the size of half of Winnipeg. being completely under 2 to 3 meters of rushing water, all of a sudden, like a tsunami, but from the interior, where the rains came down from the mountains all of a sudden, and then just overflowed the rivers and just completely flooded. And it happened in less than an hour with no warning.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's so sudden. How do you handle something like an onslaught of water like that?
Well, as you can see, you don't. You really can't fight the nature of the water at that point. You just do whatever you can immediately, and we've never seen anything like this. The last huge flood here was in '57, and some 80 people died, and that resulted in a huge diversion of the main river of the city. And you can see this is far, far higher casualties because people weren't expecting anything like this to happen. So they tried to remove their cars from garages and move it to higher water. And yeah, that just became a death trap for so many people. And it was just pure devastation, like nothing I've ever seen. It just looked like a war zone.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I guess the instinct is to save your car, but in cases like this, saving yourself might be more important. So
yeah, just people were given no time to react.
Yeah, and in fact, if you go to our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel right now, you can see some of these pictures streaming, and a lot of it is all these vehicles piled up and overturned and, rammed into each other. I guess that, describing what you said, people going to their cars when the water first started. How is the rain going now? Has it stopped yet?
No, well, right now we're getting a reprieve. So we're on the coast here. And the thing with Valencia is that it's sunny like 320 days out of the year. This absolutely incredibly perfect climate to live in. And these kind of things can happen where we get harsh rainstorms, but never anything like this. But the rain isn't letting up either. So in the evenings, we're getting storms still. They're calling it Dana, right? That is just kind of swirling in around. It's hit the south of Spain. It's now hitting Barcelona. And it just seems to be no reprieve. So yesterday, really hampering the ability for volunteers, which have been overwhelmingly incredible help. All the volunteers from the city of Valencia and from outside of Valencia coming in to assist, because really they've made the biggest difference. It's people helping each other more than anything have made the biggest difference in this.
Yeah, and you mentioned your neighbors downstairs not faring as well. You've got friends in Valencia. How is everyone doing?
Well, it really, really depends where you were. So yeah, the evening that this happened, I live on the upper floor. My house is the upper half of a home here in Valencia. Our downstairs neighbors and an 89-year-old woman with 2 cats, right? So her house instantly flooded, and we couldn't get the front door open because of the water pressure. By that time, the water was at about 1.8 meters. So we jumped over the wall of our interior patios and had to get her out that way. But if you can imagine, by the time that we had managed to pull her from her house, the waters were nearly at my head, and I'm 6'3". So it was very, very high and muddy, horrible water, like swimming through a sewer. So what we're seeing is a lot of these situations where, that day was a nightmare, and a lot of the elderly were the most affected by that.
Wow, you took a chance there. Like, that must have been terrifying, jumping in the water like in those conditions.
Yeah, but in Spain, the relationships between family and neighbors are very, very familiar. So like everyone kind of knows each other. You know your neighbors really, really well. You don't really think about anything other than trying to help the people that are around you. And now it's the same thing. So it's all neighbors helping each other. This morning, school calls out and says, hey, today at 9, we're going to try to clean up. Let's see if we can at least have a place where like the kids could be. And yeah, everyone that has kids there or other schools, and just go from block to block, just helping each other as much as you can, because the government's really doing the absolute minimum to offer assistance. Friday was the first time we've even seen any kind of response from government work, and really the volunteers have been the ones making a difference.
Yeah. So it makes me think about food and water. Like, how are people being supported in that way?
Yeah, that really goes from town to town, from block to block. We were very fortunate here that within about 48 hours, we had electricity. And then about 15 hours after, we had water. The water was coming in at first at a trickle. Now, especially in the evening, we can shower, we can clean again. But other towns are not so good. We have some friends in the neighboring town of Cataroja, which only got a trickle of water coming through now, finally last night. But a real salute to the electrical companies and the water companies, the phone companies. They're really out there 24 hours a day, trying to get everyone up and connected. When I saw the devastation, I didn't think that we were going to have electricity again for weeks. And really, I was shocked when within 48 hours we were back up and online.
I'm really glad. And we've got a good connection with you now. But before we go, we're running out of time now, Javier. What message would you want to send people listening, about the current situation right now in Spain?
Yeah, the situation is awful. The people, though, are really, really making a big difference. And there's a lot of groups like the Spanish Red Cross that are really helping out, and the fire departments. If anyone wants to try to make donations to things like the Red Cross, they will come in very handy, I'm sure, because this is a huge, huge disaster here, and a lot of towns are affected. There's also a lot of resources if you have people that are missing to reach out, and there's an ongoing effort to try to make sure that families are reconnected. Because of course there's still a lot of areas which there's no communication, they can help find those connections for people.
Well, thanks so much for taking time to talk to us, and all the best for you and your family. Hope you stay safe.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Javier de Roque is a former Winnipegger living in Valencia, Spain. We reached him over Zoom, and right now Heather Wells has the news headlines.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg holiday charity is cracking down on families double dipping on Christmas hampers. The Christmas Cheer Board says it's going to check if people requesting food and gifts have asked for hampers elsewhere. Executive Director Shauna Bell says she just wants everyone to have a fair chance to get a hamper. One community advocate, though, says denying families holiday hampers goes against the spirit of the season. And as a postal strike looms, Canada Post workers and their supporters gathered at the Manitoba legislature yesterday. The union was in a legal strike position as of Sunday, but they and Canada Post agreed to a 72-hour notice before a strike or lockout. We'll hear the latest in our next local news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. Well, still to come, we're going to speak with 3 experts about how the outcome of the American election could affect our lives up here in Manitoba. And we're also going to check in with Marcy Marcusa and Corey Funk, who are on a road trip right now to North Dakota, and they're there for the U.S. election. They're going to be going live on Wednesday. We're going to hear more about their trip and what to expect from that live show. World Report is coming up next.
On Cue with Tom Power.
Canadian rapper, singer, producer Chaos is looking back on his smash album Joyful Rebellion with a 20th anniversary reissue box set. He joins me in studio to talk about his long journey to develop the sound and messages that helped propel that album up the charts.
Take off the crabs in the bucket.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Counting votes after an election should be the easy part, but there are concerns about the U.S. election certification process as the Trump team has laid the groundwork to claim voter fraud if he loses. The countdown to start counting on The Current with Matt Galloway in half an hour.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Millions of Americans are preparing to head to the polls to choose their next president. Today is the last day of campaigning for both the Democratic and Republican candidates. Kamala Harris made her final pitch to voters in Michigan yesterday.
In one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime, and we have momentum. It is on our side. Can you feel it?
At a rally in Georgia, Donald Trump stuck to his playbook for the future of America.
With your vote on Tuesday, I will end inflation. I will stop the invasion of criminals coming into our country. And I will bring back the American dream. We're going to bring back the American dream.
Swing states are critical for both candidates. One of them is North Carolina. The state shattered early voting records this year. More than 4.4 million people cast early ballots. Many of the counties where residents cast those early ballots are ones hit hardest by Helene. The hurricane and tropical storm killed more than 100 people in the state and left thousands more devastated. The CBC's Katie Nicholson has more from North Carolina.
It's been 5 weeks since the remnants of Hurricane Helene slammed western North Carolina with floodwater and landslides.
There were bales of hay, which are about 1,100 pounds, just bouncing down the river.
Anna Ray and husband Jason Stokes have only just returned to their Burnsville area home near the Appalachian Mountains after being rescued by kayak in a multi-agency federal response. Between dealing with insurance, the damage, and the lack of potable water, you'd think voting would be the last thing on their minds. But the storm inspired them to hit the ballot box early.
If we want to have a government that works, then we've got to get this vote right.
Yeah, I just wanted to check off one more thing off my list.
There were fears voter turnout would be depressed by the storm. Special measures were brought in 13 of the hardest hit counties to make voting more accessible. Now those areas lead the state in early voting by 2%. Most of them Republican strongholds.
It was almost comical to see the Republicans suddenly caring so much about early voting.
Democratic Chair for Buncombe County, Kathy Klein, says she was amused to see Republicans embrace early voting. Donald Trump has repeatedly questioned the security of early voting. Some are nervous the special Helene voting measures may later be challenged.
And we have many attorneys ready for that.
And with North Carolina such a traditionally tight race with tiny margins, those challenges very likely to come. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Asheville, North Carolina.
It is all down to today. This is the final day of campaigning for both Harris and Trump. The CBC's Karen Pauls joins me now from Washington. And Karen, what are the candidates doing today during the last push for votes?
Both campaigns are focusing on key swing states as they're locked in a fierce battle for every vote. Vice President Kamala Harris will spend her final day of campaigning in Pennsylvania. Oprah Winfrey will deliver remarks, and Lady Gaga will perform in Philadelphia. And Harris's Pittsburgh rally will include performances by Katy Perry and others. Former President Donald Trump will be in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. His campaign will roll into West Palm Beach tonight, and he'll cast his ballot there tomorrow morning.
And what are the final messages the candidates are trying to get across as voters head out to those polls?
Harris and Trump are offering contrasting messaging in their battle for the White House. Trump saying he can't lose as long as there's no cheating.
And this is really all you need to know. Kamala broke it, and I'll fix it, and we'll do it very quickly.
Harris says her team has momentum because it's tapping into the ambitions, aspirations, and dreams of the American people. She's reached out to Michigan's Arab American community.
As president, I will do everything in my power to end the war in Gaza, to bring home the hostages, end the suffering in Gaza, ensure Israel is secure, and ensure the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, freedom, security, and self-determination.
It will be a busy day for both candidates with a lot at stake.
Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Karen Pauls in Washington. Israel's foreign ministry says it has formally put the United Nations on notice. It sent a letter to the UN officially notifying it of its intention to ban UNRWA. That is the UN's agency for Palestinian refugees. For more, let's go to the CBC's Sasha Petrusik in Jerusalem. And Sasha, what is the significance of this move?
This is another step on the way for Israel to effectively ban UNRWA from operating in the Palestinian territories, the occupied West Bank, the annexed section of Jerusalem, and most critically, the occupied part of Gaza right now, which relies on UNRWA for food aid in particular, medical aid. It is the main organization that not only delivers this aid, but coordinates aid with other organizations. Last week, Israel passed a law that effectively set the clock ticking 90 days. Within that period of time, UNRWA would not be able to operate within Israel and effectively not within these other territories as well. Israel has long accused UNRWA of being too close to various groups that Israel considers terrorist organizations, notably Hamas in Gaza, and it has accused UNRWA of not doing anything to sever those ties, to prevent its employees from working with Hamas, and from preventing its facilities from being used by Hamas to launch various attacks. UNRWA has denied all of that, and it has said it has severed ties with anybody that it considers part of Hamas. That's 9 people out of 13,000 that work for it. So through these 90 days, at the end, it could well be even more difficult for aid organizations to deliver aid throughout Gaza, and many of these parts of the territory that are already in dire need will be in even worse shape.
Thank you, Sasha.
My pleasure.
The CBC's Sasha Petrusik reporting from Jerusalem. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is calling on the country's premiers to get on board with his plan to lower house prices. He sent a letter to them yesterday. And here to go through it with us is Janice McGregor in our Parliamentary Bureau. Janice, what does this letter say?
Marcia, it's pretty extraordinary for the leader of the opposition to preemptively call on premiers to match a move that he hasn't even been elected to make yet. But in this letter released to reporters this morning, Pierre Poilievre doing just that, portraying this as a way provincial jurisdictions can help him make home ownership more than just a dream for young Canadians again, because taxes and government fees add what Poilievre calls unnecessary costs to home buyers. The letter says that if provinces match this, they could save their residents tens of thousands and generate more income tax revenue from the additional construction it would stimulate. It also says Conservatives understand that all provinces are different. Housing issues more acute in some places than others. And of course, some, like Alberta, don't have any provincial sales tax to cut. But when the federal government cut its GST on construction of new affordable rental units, Ontario, for example, did follow suit. It cut its provincial tax as well. Others did not, at a time when provincial coffers are under a lot of pressure, need more revenue for things like escalating healthcare costs.
So how could the federal government afford this move?
Well, in his initial announcement a week ago, Poilievre said his government would be able to afford this tax cut because he'd cut billions from the Housing Accelerator and infrastructure funds that the Trudeau government's been rolling out. He dismissed these as funds that build bureaucracy, not homes. But Liberals point to examples of mayors and municipalities across Canada that used this money to spark new construction projects.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Quincy Jones has died. He was one of the first Black executives to thrive in Hollywood and the music producer who brought us this. Jones produced some of Michael Jackson's biggest hits, like this song, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. He also produced the historic Thriller album. He was a singer-songwriter of prize-winning film and television scores. Jones oversaw the recording of We Are the World, the famine relief song for Africa, and he helped organize President Bill Clinton's first inaugural celebration. His publicist says he died Sunday night at his home in Bel Air, surrounded by his family. Quincy Jones was 91. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today on the show. Here's what's coming up. It's shaping up to be a very close race between U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And although American politics can feel a world away from our lives here in Manitoba, we're going to hear from 3 experts who say that's not necessarily the case. We'll find out how a second Donald Trump presidency could impact trade, immigration, and tourism here at home, as well as the possibility of how a Harris one might do the same. Meanwhile, Information Radio's Marcy Marcusa and Corey Funk are on their way to Fargo for the U.S. election. They're going to broadcast from there Wednesday. That's the day after the vote, and we'll check in with them this morning as they head south on I-29. All that and more coming up on Information Radio. "11 minutes after 8 o'clock, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Brianna Klaus is being remembered as a loving mother to her 4 children. She died after being found critically injured in the first 100 block of the Promenade in downtown Winnipeg on Thursday. Cassandra Flett is the aunt of Klaus's oldest child. She says Klaus had gone to college and at one time worked in healthcare but struggled in recent years. 32-year-old Ryan Kennedy was arrested over the weekend and is now charged in her death. A community advocate says denying families holiday hampers because they asked for one elsewhere is ridiculous and goes against the spirit of Christmas. The Christmas Cheer Board is cracking down on people it says are double dippers. It had to stop taking applications last year because of high demand, and it says a lot of those requests were duplicates. We'll hear more from the Cheer Board coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. And joining us from the other side of the glass is our studio technician and weather specialist, Abby Adeyemi. How's the forecast today, Abby?
Well, I'll tell you, we're looking at a mix of clouds, some rain with breezy conditions in most of the regions. Temperature will be around 7 degrees in the south before dropping this afternoon, while the north will stay chilly with light winds. Winnipeg currently 7, light rain we're seeing outside. The rain should stop around the noon period, leaving us with mostly cloudy skies this afternoon. It's going to be breezy sometime this morning, but the winds will lighten up later. The high for today is 7 where we are at this time, but it will cool down to about 3 degrees late this afternoon. I would say this is still a bit warmer than the average temperature of 2 degrees for this time of the year. And then for tonight, we should see some clouds and light winds roll in, and temperatures will stay steady near that 3 degrees. Up north, it's colder in Churchill. We saw some light snow earlier, but right now it's cloudy in Churchill and Thompson at temperatures 1 degrees, while down south the rain is going to be stopping around midday, leading to mostly cloudy skies and cooler temperatures. We're seeing 2 in Brandon, 4 in Dauphin, Gimli, Steinbach, Morris, all stuck at 7 degrees with light showers at this time. That should be ending around noon, followed by cloudy skies and temperatures dropping to 3 this afternoon. So just expect that light showers this morning down south. That should stop by midday, and then cloudy conditions and breezy feel in the south with temperatures dropping to around 3 this afternoon. A mild day, but gradually getting cool.
Okay, so checklist. We need a raincoat.
Yep.
Umbrella.
Check.
Maybe a scarf.
Check.
And maybe even some light gloves.
And don't wear slip-ons.
No, right. Wear something with good grip because it's going to be slippery.
Yep.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
That's CBC's Abby Adeyemi. And also behind the glass with him is Kevin Nipatebo, who is producing our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. And joining me now here in the studio is May McKillop with a look at the roads.
Hey, Emily. So we have gotten no calls on the commuter line today, but I am always suspicious of that. I'll say one spot that I've been looking at today is a closure on northbound Balmoral Street between Sargent and Cumberland. The curb lane is closed. I also noticed, just looking at a map of Winnipeg, that northbound Pembina is there's quite a bit of delays happening there, kind of from Confusion Corner all the way back up to Stafford. It's looking like. If someone is there and wants to give me an update on that area, I would love to hear about it, or anything else happening in the city. Give me a call, 204-788-3093.
8:15. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg, around the globe on the CBC Listen app and on the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. I'm Emily Brass. Well, Americans go to the polls tomorrow, and some say a Kamala Harris presidency would likely mean a continuation of current policies. But how would a second Donald Trump presidency affect our lives here in Canada, and more specifically right here in Manitoba? Trump has spent the months leading up to the American election making big promises. He says he plans to impose a 10% tariff on all imports if he gets a second term. Barry Prentice is with the Asper School of Business at the University of Manitoba. Good morning, Barry.
Good morning, Emily.
So how would you describe the trade relationship Manitoba had with the States during Biden's presidency?
Well, it's been fairly good. We've had a few hiccups. They put a tariff back on softwood lumber, which may not affect us directly. We don't have forests and sawmills, but a lot of lumber comes through Manitoba by rail here and then trucked down to the U.S., so it would still affect our distribution area.
Okay. Meanwhile, though, Trump has signaled his plan to impose a 10% across-the-board tariff on imports if he gets elected. How would that impact Manitobans?
Well, one word, disaster, I think, because it wouldn't just affect Manitoba. It's 10% for everywhere, and of course, the amount of activity, economic activity in the U.S. also affects our economic activity. We export roughly 73% of all of our exports go to the U.S., and those have grown quite a bit in the last 4 years, so it would be an impact here, we'd feel.
And how possible would it even be for him to implement a measure like a 10% tariff?
I don't know if we want to put anything past Donald Trump, but certainly there's going to be a lot of pushback from industry. I mean, people depend on our materials. For example, farmers in the U.S. depend on potash from Canada. We sell a lot of pharmaceuticals from Manitoba to the U.S., wheat and raw materials, energy. So, these are things they just can't do without. In other words, it's going to increase the prices in the U.S., and it may reduce trade quite a bit, but it's also going to cause a lot of inflation in the U.S.
Yeah, because, that's a really steep increase. Like, what kind of concerns does it raise when it changes so drastically?
Panic, I think, is a maybe not a word too strong for this in some areas, because clearly we depend so much on the U.S. Roughly, we sell twice as much agricultural exports to the U.S. as we import from them. And, of course, that really determines a lot of the economic activity in outside Winnipeg. Our food processing industry, for example, would be very exposed.
Wow. And so regardless of whoever ends up winning the election, what do you think Manitobans should watch for when it comes to the trade relationship between Canada and the States?
Well, we certainly have the free trade agreement, and anything like that, the tariff would be imposed, that would go to a tribunal. And, of course, these things all take time, and it may eventually then be reversed, but there would be a hurt right away. The only thing I do remember about Donald Trump is that his bark is often worse than his bite. So even though he's saying all these things, when it comes down to doing it, it may not happen. It may not happen quite as fast also as people might imagine.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for your perspective today, Barry.
My pleasure.
Barry Prentice is director of the Asper School of Business Trade Institute at the University of Manitoba. And next up, we're taking a look at what a second Trump presidency would mean for the tourism industry. Max Johnson is a tourism consultant based in Winnipeg. Good morning, Max.
Good morning.
So when you think back to Trump's first presidency, what impact did his term have on tourism?
Well, I think remarkably little, actually. If you look at the Manitoba tourism industry, few people will make a choice on what they're going to go and see as a vacation based on who the president is. The southbound tourism certainly changed a little bit, because as tempers started fraying in the south, more people seeking sunshine in the winter tended to go a little bit further south into Mexico, into Central America and the Caribbean. So that's certainly a trend that may continue.
And then what about under Biden? How was tourism then?
Well, I think pretty good. The biggest issue, again, southbound for tourism was the price of the Canadian dollar versus the American dollar. And as the Canadian dollar continued to sink, that determined a lot of people's destinations. But of course, northbound tourism, made Canada considerably more economical for American tourists who wanted to come and see polar bears or come fishing or come and explore Canada. So it's a very much a swings and roundabouts.
Oh, that's interesting. So what type of implications would a second Trump presidency have for Manitobans heading south of the border?
Well, I think the biggest potential issue comes from any tightening in the immigration and security regime that they have. As you probably know, Canadians are the only people in the world at the moment that don't need a visa to travel to the U.S. Most countries have what's called a visa waiver program, so the practicalities of it are not difficult. It's an online form that you have to fill out. But given that one of the questions is, have you been to Cuba, that if the Americans decide that their security and immigration needs Canadians to fall in line with the rest of the world, that could present some issues.
Yeah. And then what about new Canadians who might be coming from another country? Would they have issues?
Well, certainly until they become Canadian citizens, when the new Canadians and old Canadians are the same. But certainly the United States is considerably anguished, I think is the word, even the current Biden administration, by the number of people who Canada seems to be coming in with fewer checks than we might prefer.
Okay. And so what do you think people should look for when it comes to tourism, no matter who ends up being elected?
Have a wonderful trip. Try to avoid politics. If politics can't avoid you, so be it. But just go away. And most Americans, most Canadians are wonderful people. We tend to get a little bit frustrated by the rowdies amongst us, but most people are terrific, whatever their political stripe is. So go, enjoy, have fun.
And don't talk about politics.
And don't talk about politics.
Thank you, Max.
Exactly. Thanks a lot.
Max Johnson is a tourism consultant. And now, Harris and Trump have shared the concerns about migrants entering the U.S. through Canada. And according to the RCMP, as of October, 85 people were apprehended this year while trying to illegally cross into Manitoba. If elected, Trump has vowed to conduct a large-scale deportation operation. And we've reached Canada Research Chair in Migration Futures and U of M sociology professor Lori Wilkinson to talk about that. Hi, Lori.
Hi, Marcy.
It's Emily, but that's okay.
Oh, sorry.
You wouldn't know. So how different are the Republican and Democrat immigration policies?
Not very different, actually. If you look at Trump's policy around barring immigrants from Muslim countries and reducing the number of migrants, Biden ran on a platform to change that, and it took him a long time to repeal those measures. And if you look at the deportation record, actually Obama deported far more people than Trump did during his term.
Okay, so when you hear Trump say he plans to conduct a large-scale deportation operation if he's elected, how feasible is that, deporting so many people all at once?
Simply it's not feasible. So estimates are that there are about 13.2 million people in the United States who are not documented. So if you deported, say, 1 million per year, it would cost $88 billion, that's with a B, annually to do that. So I think from a cost perspective, it's not possible. But also the immigration and customs enforcement people who are needed to deport the individuals, the estimate is about 100,000 new people need to be trained. And you can't just train them overnight. You need people who can speak language. You need people who understand the system. So I don't think it's possible.
Yeah. And then up here on this side of the border, what could this mean for immigration in Manitoba?
Well, probably not too much change. Like in the short term, you'll find that many Americans visit Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada and ask questions about how to migrate, but you don't see large numbers of Americans migrating. What could happen is, the people who are under protective orders may feel that they're not as secure because once these protective orders are withdrawn, then they can be deported as well. So they may find themselves looking for another place to go where they can have some more stability.
Okay. And when we talk about illegal migration between Manitoba and the U.S., what do you think's missing from that conversation?
Well, I think one is it's not illegal to migrate, so we have to call them undocumented. So under international law, everyone has a right to migrate, and both Canada and the U.S. have signed on to that agreement. I think from a perspective of, if we think about migrants, and I hate talking about them in this way, but if you talk about them as a supply and receiving factors, it's the supply side that drives migration. And the problem is that Canada and the U.S., we can put up walls, we can make it harder for people to migrate, but people are smart. They're going to try to get around all of these systems, not because they're trying to come illegally, it's because they have no other choice. They're found if you look at the people who are walking across the Darien Gap, they're risking their lives, even their children's lives. But if they stayed, they're found, about 70% of them are farmers whose crops have failed, who are coming from countries that have no assistance for farmers, and their families are literally starving. So staying for them would mean dying too. And that's the thing we have to think about, is why people are migrating, because most people don't want to leave. They leave because they have to. And so until we take care of that part of the issue, it doesn't matter what kind of rules we make, what kind of walls we create, people will get around them.
They'll find a way. Thank you so much, Lori, for joining us with us.
No problem, Emily. I hope you have a lovely day.
You too. Lori Wilkinson is a professor in the Sociology and Criminology Department at U of M. She's also a Canada Research Chair in Migration Futures. And now we're going to go to CBC's Marcy Marcusa, who's with Corey Funk in a vehicle heading south right now on I-29. But they're not going to Target. The duo is headed to Fargo to talk to Americans about the upcoming U.S. election. And they're going to put on a live show down there on Wednesday, the day after the election. Marcy is in the passenger seat, ready to talk with us. Good morning, Marcy.
Hi. That was really interesting listening to everything, right? The tariffs, the tourism, the immigration implications for this election, Emily. We are already down south, just crossed the border. We pulled off the I-29, so we just pulled off into a small hamlet on the way side road to Hamilton. And that's part of what we're going to be doing today, is looking at some of these small towns in the United States side of the border and talking to some folks down here about what they're thinking about this very important election coming up tomorrow.
Yeah, so what is on the itinerary today in terms of talking to Americans about it?
Well, I'll tell you what. First, I'll tell you what Manitobans have been telling us about it. So on my Facebook page, I asked what is making Manitoba lean into this election. So Rick Fike said, democracy, he feels, is threatened. I'm paraphrasing these here just in the sake of time. Brian Bierling wrote in and he said, when the U.S. gets the sniffles, Canada gets a cold, and this time we might get pneumonia. That's his language. Erin Thomas said she's got a son down in Michigan, and she's increasingly worried about the climate down south and the tension down here. And Kelly Keith wrote in and said that they this is, I think, something very interesting, because a lot of us, you're making the joke about Target, but a lot of us will know that we go to Grand Forks and Fargo. It's our closest point from Manitoba to cross the border, and maybe you go for that weekend with the family. Maybe you hit the water slides. Maybe it's spring break, little shopping. Kelly Keith and his family said they plan a trip next weekend to the States. They're going to watch the election tomorrow, and they may not go if Trump or the Republican Party win. They have that deep of a concern. So that's part of what we've been exploring with Manitobans. As far as what we've been exploring with Americans, I mean, it's really going to be trying to figure out what they're going to be doing down here and what people are feeling. Because we're going to Fargo. It's our ultimate destination. But we're going to be in Fargo, which is a city of about 135,000 people, about 4 hours down I-29 here south. But we also will be able to cross the Red River, something else we share with North Dakota, or Minnesotans and North Dakotans, the Red River Divide. We're going to cross into Moorhead. And that will be interesting because we'll be able to give you some of the American views from both states. Because let's remember, North Dakota, historically the majority for years on end has voted Republican for the Republican nominee for president, in this case Trump. But in Minnesota, it goes 50-50. They have supported Democrats, they have supported Republicans. So we're going to see what happens with that.
Yeah, two very different states. We just have about 10 seconds left. Maybe you can quickly tell us what to expect on the live show on Wednesday?
Yeah, you know what? On Wednesday, I've been on the phone with a woman named Naima Day. She's the first Black person elected to Fargo School Board. Her daughter's also 18 and voting the first time. I'm hoping to hear from both of them. She came to the United States as a refugee from South Sudan 10 years ago, so that will be a very interesting day after election. Also, we have someone that used to live in Winnipeg. He's now a lawyer in Fargo. Used to work in immigration as well. He voted already for Trump, so he's going to be joining us for the morning. His name is David Chapman, and then we have a representative from the Democratic Party. So all of those guests will be joining us to walk us through whatever happens. And throughout, of course, the evening will be at the different watch parties in Fargo. So lots to discuss here and the implications on Canada as these are our closest neighbors.
Well, have a great trip, Marcy.
All right. Thanks very much, Emily.
Thank you. That was Marcy Marcusa, who's on her way to Fargo. The news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:31, it appears the rain has stopped, at least for now. We even see a little bit of sun out there. It is 7 degrees. Our temperature is going to slide this afternoon to 3. The family of a woman killed near Portage Place Mall last week has placed flowers where her body was found. Brianna Klaus was a mother of 4. She died after being found critically injured in the first 100 block of the Promenade on Thursday afternoon. Cassandra Flett is the paternal aunt of Klaus's oldest child, and she's visited the site twice now with Brianna's family.
It's an eerie feeling to be there. We were just coming there as forensics was leaving and with items, and it's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking for her parents, for her sister, for her children, for all of us.
Flett says Klaus had gone to college and at one time worked in healthcare but struggled in recent years. 32-year-old Ryan Kennedy has been arrested and is now charged with second-degree murder. A Winnipeg holiday charity is cracking down on families double-dipping on Christmas hampers. The Christmas Cheer Board says it will check if people requesting food and gifts have asked for hampers elsewhere. Executive Director Shauna Bell says she just wants everyone to have a fair chance at getting a hamper.
It is such a stressful time of the year for so many folks. I cannot hold it against anybody who is looking in a number of different areas to just be able to have some relief from that stress. But it's just one of those things that we need to help as many people as we can.
The Christmas Cheer Board had to stop taking applications last year because of high demand. Bell says up to 700 applications last year were duplicates. A community advocate says denying families holiday hampers because they asked for one at another place goes against the spirit of the season. Phone lines for Christmas hamper requests open tomorrow. More than 100 postal workers rallied outside the Manitoba legislature yesterday, calling for a better deal. Talks continue between their union and Canada Post. The Canadian Union of Postal Workers could have been in a legal strike position as of yesterday, but has yet to issue strike notice. Canada Post presented its latest offer last week, including wage increases of 11.5% over 4 years. Sean Tugby is president of the union's Winnipeg chapter.
The current offer for wages was less than the rate of inflation. The offer on pensions was to reduce the pensions for new members and to reduce what we have for current members as well. It's also a reduction in benefits, and so there's no gains at all. It's all concessions.
Canada Post says the negotiations come at a critical time as it deals with financial and operational challenges amid competition from other parcel delivery services. Manitoba Housing is accusing a security guard of being inattentive and distracted as trespassers set fire to a Dauphin retirement home. The new lawsuit claims trespassers played piano, peed on the floor, and started 2 fires, all while the guard was in the building. Manitoba Housing alleges the guard did not patrol at all. It is suing him and now bankrupt Neptune Security Services, saying they were negligent. That fire happened 2 years ago. A 21-year-old man pleaded guilty to arson in the case. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is asking the country's premiers to support his new housing plan. He sent a letter to the premiers yesterday. In it, he says if he's elected prime minister, he will scrap the federal sales tax on all homes that cost less than $1 million. And he asks the provincial leaders and territorial leaders to do the same for any provincial or territorial sales tax. Poilievre says the move will make housing more affordable and will mean more homes will be built every year. Legendary music producer Quincy Jones has died. Jones' career, which dates back to the early 1950s, saw him work with the biggest names in 20th century music, from Ray Charles, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan to Frank Sinatra, Peggy Lee, and of course, Michael Jackson. Jones produced Jackson's 1982 album Thriller, which remains one of the best-selling albums of all time. He was also the producer of We Are the World, the 1985 charity single which sold 20 million copies and raised tens of millions of dollars for Ethiopian famine relief. Quincy Jones has died at the age of 91. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Heather. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you, Emily.
That was Heather Wells from the CBC News Desk. And looking ahead to Radio Noon today in our conversation, we'll explore the topic of hoarding. It's a subject that's tough for people to talk about, but after a woman reached out to CBC to warn others about the dangers of hoarding based on her own experience, we wanted to learn more, and maybe you know someone who's struggling with hoarder behavior. Our guest will be Ellen Burchell, a hoarding behavior and intervention specialist. So tune in for Radio Noon. Abby, one last look at the forecast.
We're looking across the province. We'll see showers in the south that will be tapering off by midday, while the north will see mostly cloudy skies and light snow. Temperatures peaking at around 7 in Winnipeg, and the southern regions will be deeping down to 3 degrees this afternoon. But cooler temperatures will prevail in the north. We're going to see highs near 2 degrees in Thompson and Churchill. Other regions down south, we're hovering near 7 and 4 degrees now.
And kind of soggy. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
That's CBC's Addie Emmy. Thanks also to May McKillop and Kevin Nipatebo, who were here on the show with me. I'm Emily Brass. We're going to see you tomorrow. The Current's next.